Coming up on this episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover.
And we've seen this happen a little bit before. Tony Dungy was like really, really good at winning close games. Or rather, Peyton Manning with Tony Dungy was really good at winning close games. But
welcome back to Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. We are here with our 8th and final division preview ahead of the 2025 NFL season. We're mid to late August. We're almost there. Feels like football is back, gentlemen. How are we both doing? By the time this goes out, we're like 2 weeks away. We're 3 weeks away now because of when we're recording things. But yeah, football is back almost. How are you feeling about it?
Great, yeah. Preseason's been alive and kicking. Every 7th round running back is great and going to be atop the depth chart by week 2, I'm sure. No, it's been really good to get some kind of football back. We had the Hall of Fame game. We had week 1. Everyone's played now. We've seen every team. We'll be scheduling our fantasy football draft very soon. So, can't wait.
Yeah, reigning champion of our fantasy football league. Looking to defend my crown. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any particular notable, I suppose, any standout performances from preseason? I suppose we'd have only seen week 1 at the time of recording, so maybe it'll be very out of date by the time we get to the release of this.
There's a couple of lower name rookies, I think, who stood out. But I think in terms of exactly what you expected, Abdul Carter looks like an NFL Pro Bowler already. I know it was a preseason, but he looks exactly like you would hope. And the Ravens pass rusher, Mike Green.
Yeah.
We know why they got him at a discount, but goodness, he looks ready to hit the ground running. So the good get better. Not maybe in the case of the Giants, but certainly in the case of the Ravens, yeah.
Yeah, I think highlight from week 1 was CD Lamb getting cleaned out on the sideline by the
Incredible.
Incredible. And getting flagged for it as well.
Well, he shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely shouldn't have been there. I think we're just grateful he didn't get seriously hurt because he took quite the whack. Maybe that referee played linebacker, I think. Outstanding stuff. Right, anything else to come out? Actually, I would have walked back a take from one of our previous episodes, if that's okay. Which, just one.
I've got a list. I didn't know we were allowed to.
Well, I think this one will definitely be on the list of ones that I should walk back. So, again, lifting the curtain, we're recording this a week in advance, but we're also recording this on the day that the New Heights podcast has just had about 10 million views in 12 hours or whatever it is, 19 hours since it premiered, which is insane. It's going to be one of the top 5 podcast episodes or top 3 podcast episodes in the history of podcasting ever. And I mean, if we got 0.005% of that'd be ace. Anyway, so what kind of problems? I've not watched it all, but I've seen enough kind of bits of it and stretches of it. And I made a big kind of claim. I think Travis Kelce is going to have a huge year, a monster year. Kind of a bit down year last year. I think he's going to come back strong and have that one last big season to show kind of why he's one of the all-time great tight ends. That's a man that's got no dog in him. That's a man that's got no hunger in him. He's done. I think he's done, yeah. That's not somebody for me that's kind of going to be grinding away, trying to get better. He is still fantastic, of course, and he's an all-time great. But I'm going to walk back my tail. I think he's going to have a monster season. Yeah. No dog left in Travis Kelce.
Welcome on board, yeah. Someone I have not been drafting at all this fantasy season. I don't think the fall-off's too much. I know he got his cumulative stats last year, but the yards per reception, it was all down. And I don't know if they're going to bombard him with targets again as much as they always do, because they always do, but the receiving corps has been upgraded in Kansas. And yeah, I think I would have said this on our KC preview, but yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
But shout out Travis and Jason Kelce. Props for the success of the podcast and the show.
And Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
We're Taylor Swift fans here. I am. So
the phenomenon that is Taylor Swift actually driving all that. So shout out to those guys and their success. Congrats. Well done. And just no dog left in Travis Kelce. But good to also get the grown men getting angry at Taylor Swift in their sporch content and going early, which is always nice. So yeah.
Well, she even called that out as well, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, which is great. So fair play to the Kelces and Taylor Swift. Let's go to our guest. We've got a Vikings guest joining us. So we're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings as the main focus of the NFC North. Of course, we will talk about the rest of them. We've got Arif Hasan joining us to talk about all things Vikings. Let's roll with our guest. Kicking off our NFC North preview, we've got a fantastic guest joining us to help preview the Minnesota Vikings. We've got Arif Hasan joining us, who's going to help break down the 14-win Vikings from 2024. We'll see if Arif thinks it's going to be 14 wins, less or more, this year. Arif, welcome to Good Teams Win Great Teams cover. First of all, thanks ever so much for coming on. How are you getting on? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. The season's about to start. How could I not be happy? We've been talking about, these teams in the previews. We've been doing it for months and months, talking about the draft, talking about free agency, talking about training camp. We're so close. So I'm pretty happy about all of that.
Yeah, I think this is our 29th episode of the year so far since we restarted as free agency began. So we've done a lot. We've filled a lot of
a
lot of time. We are just before the third week of preseason, I guess, and we're almost there. You're a big fan and writer as well around all things Minnesota Vikings. We know you have sort of a lot going on. Wide left, you've got podcast. Kind of tell everyone kind of where.
Sure.
What have you got going on?
Yeah, so primarily I'm over at wideleft.football. That's my newsletter. It's a newsletter that covers the NFL at large, but we do have a little bit of a focus on the Vikings just because it's my interest. It's what I'm, most confident in talking about. And also that's where a lot of my audience comes from. But we also have people that are talking about, national level stuff. We just launched kind of a college football /draft arm that's going to be updated throughout the year. So I'm really excited about that. And then we also have like a culture politics section, which I know not everybody is super into. You can always mute it, but it is some of where I think personally my best writing comes from, where I talk a lot about kind of the culture and politics surrounding the NFL or kind of whatever comes across my mind. So it's something that I take great pride in and I care a lot about. But like you said, I've got a couple of podcasts. I've got the Norsecode Podcast that's been running for 12 years now. That's a Vikings podcast. And I've also got the Viking Squad Show. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network that runs every day, but I'm on it on Mondays and Thursdays. So you can check all those out. And then like with here, I make, pretty frequent guest appearances across. So, just follow me on my socials. I'll post whenever I can. At Arif Hasan NFL on Twitter, at Arif.peaceguy.social on Blue Sky. And those are the only two socials I really use, if I'm being honest.
12 years with the Norse.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's like looking back has been great. We've switched like podcast feeds a couple of times too, so I can't find my old episodes, which I honestly think is a great thing. But yeah, just like looking back, it was like, oh man, is Christian Ponder going to be good? Like that kind of stuff.
What was your take on it? Did you think he was going to be good?
I thought that he probably would be, and I was impressed by stuff I really shouldn't have been. I was like, man, he graduated early with an MBA. He's got to be a smart quarterback, right? And he's more athletic than people think, which that part was true, but it didn't help him. And I was like, the elbow injury that he had multiple times in college, don't worry, his arm strength is fine. It wasn't fine.
People get fitter in the NFL, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So I thought he had a pretty good chance. I wasn't the most enthused about him. I was a big Cam Newton guy in that draft. I like Jake Locker a lot in that draft. I was a big skeptic of Andy Dalton, who's had the longest career out of all of those guys.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that's you do this for over a decade, you learn a lot along the way. So in some ways, I'm kind of happy to be wrong because I learned some lessons.
I think this is our third season now of Good Teams and Great Teams covers heading to the 2025 season, our third full season, I guess. And like we said, a lot of takes that don't turn out great, but I can't imagine 12 years of them. Jesus, that's.
I think if we go back 12 episodes, we have takes like that. So, doesn't bode too well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, Arif, join us. You're a man that knows a lot about the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm sure he's going to talk a lot of sense about the Minnesota Vikings. So let's get into our first headlines around the Vikings, because, very intriguing team heading into 2025 after such a good year last year. ended in a bit of a damp squib, but a lot of hope for this season. First headline, McCarthyism alive and well in Minnesota.
Great headline.
Byron wrote these.
I thought you'd like it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Vikings aware of Darnold's limitations and go with JJ. What is a successful season for the young quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cop-out answer obviously is they win a lot of games, but I think that, a more reasonable and useful answer would be something along the lines of, isolating a lot of the elements that made him, not the first overall prospect, all of the elements that made him kind of a question mark. I remember before the combine, actually, a lot of people had him as a second round prospect, and there were good reasons for that. People were worried about kind of, his ability to add touch to his throws. People were worried about things like ball location. He's generally accurate, but he's not putting the ball in a spot that's going to enable the receiver to get a bunch of yak or, keep the ball like as catchable as possible, stuff like that. And then obviously, he was in a run first offense with Harbaugh at Michigan, and, he didn't throw the ball a lot. And so just kind of seeing how he adapts to kind of being kind of the cornerstone of the offense, because we know in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell that even if they say they're going to emphasize the run, it's all relative. They are a pass first team. There's no question about that. They are, by some metrics, the most pass happy team in the NFL. And they're probably not in reality, but they're up there. They're a top 5 pass happy team. I don't think that's going to change. Right. And so he's going to be a big part or big component of that offense. And so his ability to handle that load, his ability to improve upon his weaknesses and generate a lot of value through efficient play, taking care of the football. He's a functionally rookie. So, if he throws a couple more interceptions than you want, if he kind of runs into pressure a little bit more than you want, that's not a huge knock. Obviously, it's, ideal if he doesn't do that. But I think that, managing the ball, taking care of things while still finding ways to create explosive plays with that supporting cast, I think that would be a successful season. And if he does all those things, the wins will come, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to be a 14-win team again, but I think that the wins will come. And I think being a 10-win team is a reasonable target goal for them. Whether or not that's the most likely scenario, that's not what goals are, right? I think that's a reasonable target goal for them. And so I think that that's what a successful team would look like, where the offense, kind of remains top 10-ish in terms of efficiency metrics. Hopefully the defense will keep up, and that'll kind of produce some wins along the way.
Yeah. And how confident are you kind of the fact that we've seen Kevin O'Connell work with all these different kinds of quarterbacks so far? How confident are you that Kevin O'Connell is going to be able to get the best out of JJ McCarthy?
About as confident as I think you can reasonably be. Every situation's a question mark. Everything is different. So you can never be like fully confident. But you take a look at his work with Sam Darnold and Joshua Dobbs, of all people, Nick Mullins. He is Kirk Cousins, honestly. Like, Kirk Cousins' efficiency numbers went down under O'Connell, but his ability to take over games, something he honestly never had in Minnesota and only super occasionally had in Washington. He actually had in the couple of years that he had with O'Connell. He was able to engineer fourth quarter comebacks, something he almost never did in a Vikings uniform before that. He was able to generate more conversions on third and long. And that was a direct response to kind of his weaknesses in Minnesota. And so I think he's pulled the most out of a lot of different quarterbacks. And like you said, they're different styles of quarterback, right? Like, Darnold, it takes more chances than Cousins, and Dobbs takes even more chances than that. And Mullins somehow takes even more chances than that. He's like a Jameis style quarterback, right? And having kind of some quarterbacks who live in chaos, some quarterbacks who live in structure, some quarterbacks who are like reasonably athletic, like a Sam Darnold. The quarterbacks were not like Kirk Cousins. Quarterbacks who were much more athletic, like Dobbs. Kind of figuring out how to maximize those quarterbacks who have different cognitive capacities, different playing styles. That's incredibly impressive to me. It speaks a lot to his ability to coach up these quarterbacks. Now, he did lose a little bit of the staff that was responsible for that. Grant Dudinsky went to Jacksonville, and he's credited him a lot. But I think that you can be reasonably confident that he's going to pull as much as he can out of maximizing JJ McCarthy. So at that point, it's just kind of up to McCarthy. They've got, we're going to talk about in a second, but they've got, an upgraded offensive line. They've got a great receiving core. They've got a good head coach and play caller. They've got a pretty reasonably good running game. This kid doesn't really have excuses except that he's young, and that's only going to, look what just happened to Anthony Richardson. That's only going to get you so much.
Yeah. I'm really interested and intrigued to see how JJ McCarthy gets on. Byron, any quick thoughts on JJ McCarthy?
Yeah, echo basically everything. I think I'm about as all in as you can be on JJ McCarthy. I've already backed him to be MVP at 100 to 1 because he's 100 to 1.
100 to 1, yeah.
You know, the last time you had, I mean, Jordan Addison's suspension has pushed this down a little, but the last time you had 3 pass catchers in fantasy going as early as Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Justin Jefferson was Peyton Manning in his MVP year in Denver, 2014,
2013, 2013, yeah. Like 50 touchdowns, yeah.
Yeah, so do I expect it? No, but he's 100 to 1. He's not anymore. He's about 60 to 1. So I may be still back at 61, but I'm not going to go. I'm already back to it 100 to 1. I'm as all in as you can be. I've always been Sam Darnold. I don't say a hater, but I've watched Sam Darnold play in the NFL his entire career. You know,
I'm not a hater, but I've seen him play. Says a lot, I think.
Yeah. If Kevin O'Connell can get Sam Darnold, and we talked about our bad takes earlier, Arif. I projected the Vikings after JJ McCarthy went down last year to have the worst record in the NFL because I'm not a Sam Darnold hater, but I trust Kevin O'Connell. I think I trust him with my dog. I don't have any children, but with my dog right now, because if you can get Sam Darnold to win 14 games, yep, you are the man.
Yeah.
I will back JJ McCarthy sight unseen to be MVP. That's how confident I am in JJ McCarthy and Kevin O'Connell, more importantly.
Quite the stamp of approval there, Byron.
Yeah, couldn't be stronger.
Arif just mentioned a little bit of that. We're going to come on to that. The interior of the offensive line. Do you want fries with that? Vikings invest in the interior of the O-line by adding Will Fries and friend Ryan Kelly in free agency and drafting Jackson in the first round. Yeah, the revamp then of the interior of the O-line. It seems to be in a bit of a theme in the NFC North that I think all 4 teams have kind of gone through some sort of big change of the interior of the offensive line. How do you think this is going to work for the Vikings?
I think it's going to work better than signing Aaron Banks is going to for the Packers, if I'm being honest. But no, I think that there's a fair amount of variability in what you might get out of these guys because Ryan Kelly is older and his previous season wasn't as good as his peak, and he's a Pro Bowl center, right? He's really good, but his best days are probably behind him. Will Fries is coming off of a small sample of really good play and also an injury that was enough to scare off a lot of teams that needed offensive line help from even contacting him. And so there's probably something to be kind of concerned about there. And then Donovan Jackson's a rookie, right? So we don't know. We have no idea. We've seen a lot of rookie guards perform well right away, but more often than not, it takes a year or two for even the good ones to produce in a fashion that's good. And so for me, I think that the interior offensive line was garbage for the Vikings for the past couple of years for a lot of reasons, like Blake Brandel, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram. That's just the most recent iteration, but it's gone back for years and years and years how poor it is. So I think that it would be really surprising to me if they approach that level of play. So to me, there is like a floor. But after that floor, there's a lot of variability in how that interior offensive line is going to do. Really confident in those bookends, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill. And so I think that the scenarios for me are, if you were to rank all the offensive lines, which that's a good subjective exercise, but people love to do it. I'd say they at the 5th percentile outcome. I mean, there's a ton of outcomes, but 5th percentile outcome, they're like a top 12, top 10 offensive line. And then the 95th percentile outcome, they're a top 3 offensive line. Like, I think those are the opportunities for them available given all of this in investment. And I think Donovan Jackson, who did look bad in the preseason, that is just unquestionably true. I think that he's got more tools in his tool belt to be a better guard than Blake Brandel or Ed Ingram were last year. And even if those first couple of games are a struggle for him as he continues to kind of adapt to the speed of the NFL, I think that the season-long performance for him is going to be a bit better than we saw from, Bradbury or Pat Elflein or any of these guys that have plagued the Vikings at that position for so long. So I'm reasonably confident it's going to be a pretty good upgrade. If they hit that kind of high-end outcome in their top 3 offensive line, it would be very difficult for me to see them, kind of missing the playoffs. Certainly I still wouldn't make them a favorite in the NFC North, but I think that they've got a lot of tools to succeed, just kind of given this investment.
Excellent. Let's move on to headline number 3 then. Let's talk about the defensive line. Flores to plant chaos for opposing offenses. Vikings had Hargraves and Allen in free agency to try and turn their front into a fjord, which, if you don't know what a fjord is, like I didn't know until half an hour ago. Joe explained it to me that it's apparently some sort of Norse.
Yeah, it's a river worn, or not a river worn, like an ocean worn canyon, right? And so there's supposed to be kind of like a water passage, but as this Chiron tells us, they can be very complex and difficult to navigate. They're deep and dangerous. They're gorgeous, by the way. But they're often ice ridden because you find them in like Norway and Sweden. Just take a look at those coastlines. Those are fjords.
Lots go. There we go. Look, we're an educational podcast as well as a NFL gambling one. But yes, so fjord, cold, deep, and impassable. Is there any weakness in this defense? So we've seen this defense just take off the last couple of years under Brian Flores. How do you think these additions of Hargrave, of Jonathan Allen are going to kind of complement what was already there?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the defense has been outstanding under Flores. Between week 3 and week 13 of Flores' first year, they were the top defense in the NFL by EPA per play. Those first 2-3 weeks were not great, and as you can tell by the arbitrary endpoint I picked, the last couple of weeks were not great either. But that middle was really good. And last year they were top 5 defense by most metrics. I think top 2 by a solid majority of metrics, right? Depending on how you measure, it's like the Broncos, the Ravens, the Eagles, whatever, right? Great defense. This year, I think that a lot of elements that make a defense good are dependent on variance and randomness. Not to say that good defenses aren't good, but great defenses can sometimes not be as great the next year because of that, right? And we can talk about like some of the changes on the defense, but I think just generally speaking, it's going to be really difficult to replicate a top 5 performance. But I do have a lot of trust in Brian Flores. I do have a lot of faith in some of the players that they've acquired over the past couple of years. Obviously Jonathan Grenard, 2 years ago, outstanding addition. Andrew Van Ginkel, outstanding addition. They still have Harrison Smith back there. Blake Cashman, a crazy underrated addition, super great linebacker, and gems that pop up like Ivan Pace. Harrison Phillips has been there for a couple of years. He's a really great player too. But then they add Hargraves and Allen, like you said, right? They've got Dallas Turner waiting in the wings to be part of that package. That's going to be in all likelihood, we can't say with any certainty, but that's probably going to be an outstanding pressure unit. The Vikings went from a 60% blitz rate 2 years ago to a 42% blitz rate, depending on who you ask, last year. Now, this is how crazy those blitz rates are. They led the league in blitz rate last year at 40-something%. So 60, crazy stuff. There's like a brief moment, I think, in last year where they were second in the league in blitz rate to Denver. And the Vikings, I don't know if someone told Brian Flores that he'd fallen to second place, but they started ramping it up again and just never looked back. So that's I think endemic to their DNA, but I think that they like to be able to rush 4. In fact, they were so kind of like, it was such a patchwork defense 2 years ago that they rushed for the least amount of any team in the league, and actually the least amount of any team in the history of data that we have on like blitz rates. It goes back like 10 years. And they improved that really markedly, but they were still one of the lowest in the NFL last year. I think they want to be able to do it, but they weren't comfortable with kind of the defensive tackle package that they had for that. And they've directly addressed that with Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. And so I think we're going to see a little bit more of that. Maybe we're going to slough off on the number of blitzes that we have. It's still always going to be about 35%, but fourth down, they like to drop additional players in coverage. And so if you know that you can get pressure with 3 or 4, right, then you've got the ability to drop 7 or 8 in coverage on a critical third down. And that's really going to screw a lot of quarterbacks up. And so I think that having Hargrave, especially as a third down specialist, Jonathan Allen as an every down specialist, honestly, is going to give them some pressure looks that will allow them to be a little bit more sound in coverage, which is going to be really important because, you asked, are there any weaknesses on this defense? It's the cornerback group. It's, Byron Murphy's good, right? But after that, it's a bunch of question marks. I think you've got reasonable flyers like Isaiah Rodgers. You've got like moonshot flyers like Jeff Okudah. You've got complete unknowns like Mekhi Blackman. But I think that's going to be kind of are they going to survive? Because last year it wasn't a great cornerback group, but it was probably better heading into the year than this year's is. Shaq Griffin hadn't been good for 3 years. He turns in a reasonable season. Stephon Gilmore hadn't been amazing, I guess, in a year and a half or so, and he turns in a pretty good season. And we don't have that history with the cornerbacks that they're playing now. And so, this high risk, high reward defense was almost always getting the reward side of it last year. And I think that they're still going to succeed at a pretty high rate, but it would be surprising to me if they don't like consistently give up some big plays throughout the season. And so that's going to be kind of the concern when and where they give up those big plays, what situations they put the rookie or not rookie, but first year quarterback in. That's going to be kind of the big question mark. It's going to be fun. That doesn't always mean it's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, just highlighting the point there, I think it was the concern over the secondary and the corners. So important to be able to kind of get there with 4 then, as you mentioned. And we saw, particularly the Eagles last year, is probably the best example of it, about how they were able to do that in the playoffs and of course, the Super Bowl where they just destroyed the Chiefs. But yeah, that ability to get there with 4, have 7 in coverage, makes it very, very difficult no matter kind of, what offensive talent you're up against. It does make it hard for the offense to kind of pick you apart.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's go for our 4th and final one, and this is my favourite of the headlines. Well done, Byron. Naylor, I hardly know her. With Jordan Addison suspended for the first 3 games due to DUI arrest, will Jalen step up as the wide receiver 2 to start the year, or will it be one of the rookies? So I think, Addison's missing, is it 3 games Addison's missing? For the DUI trouble he got into. Is there a worry that it might be a bit difficult those first few games, or is there enough with Jefferson, Hawkinson, and then kind of what's behind them to kind of get the job done the first few weeks?
I'd say, the pure talent that Jefferson and Hawkinson provide as receivers, I think is a lot better than most teams have, right? And so I want to start there. But I think the Vikings have always been kind of aware that not having that depth has been an issue for them in cases where like Addison gets injured, right? Which has happened before, right? Or that Naylor gets injured, which has happened a lot. He's actually currently suffering a hand. He's got like some unknown hand injury, like he jammed his hand or something like that. I'm not really confident about what that's going to look like for him heading into the season. I'm guessing he'll be ready. Otherwise, we'll have heard more. But still, that's a question mark. And a hand injury is particularly interesting because he's had a drop problem in the NFL, especially last year when he took on a bigger role. His first year that he actually took on a role with the Vikings, he had a very low drop rate, but he had some drop problems in college. He had some drop problems in camp. Didn't have that many drops his first year, but since then has had difficulty holding onto the ball. So that, invites some questions. But unfortunately, the guys that we've got to potentially kind of rotate through and provide, alleviate some of that pressure, there's not a lot of reasons to be confident in them. Ty Felton has been pretty interesting as a special teams player, but hasn't really done a lot as a scrimmage player in practices or the preseason. You take a look at somebody that's kind of finally emerging like Lucky Jackson, great preseason week 1, could have made the argument for wide receiver 4, and then therefore in this situation, wide receiver 3, but then had a really difficult preseason week 2. And we just don't know what to do about that. Rondale Moore out for the season with an injury. That really sucks. And then at that point, I mean, no one can really be confident. You got like 3 or 4 guys that you're not confident in. After that, there's like not anyone else to turn to. Like Thayer Thomas isn't going to be it. These guys that you only know if you've been like following training camp or you scour waiver wires and transaction reports and stuff like that. These guys are probably not going to, turn something around. So I am worried about it, but at a baseline, having Jefferson and Hawkinson is, I'm not going to say a luxury in the same way having an excellent 3 wide is, but it's a lot better than a lot of teams in the league, and that's going to give you enough weapons to succeed. And then you can get like occasional receptions from like a Josh Oliver who has a surprising number of touchdowns, or Jordan Mason is actually a pretty decent pass catcher. You've got Aaron Jones, of course, so you'll get a couple of receptions going around for those first 3 weeks, and then the offense can really turn on the jets as soon as Addison arrives.
So Addison will arrive in week 4 in Dublin because that's where the Vikings play in week 4 against the Pittsburgh Steelers at Croke Park, which should be a fun one. I just want to ask a quick one. Has there been much buzz around the fact that Vikings have played in England, in London, quite a lot recently?
A lot.
I think.
Yeah.
Last year, definitely.
I've seen them
Last
way
year,
back
then
when.
2 years ago, and like so they did like 2017, 2013, 2009. It's been a lot.
It's been like
Yeah.
definitely like 3 of the last 4 years, something. A
Mhm.
little bit different going to Dublin because that's a very special one being the first one. Has there been much buzz around the fact that the Vikings are involved in that game in Dublin with it being the first one that's going to be in Ireland?
A little bit. I think that it's initially this was when this was announced, a lot of fans were pretty upset, but I think that the reaction over time has just been like, well, hold on, the Vikings aren't losing any home games, right? And so that's a huge advantage. Plus, I mean, the Vikings, going back to like 1983, I think are undefeated internationally. Um, and so, that it doesn't technically have any bearing on future games, but it does, give you confidence and stuff like that. Plus, a team that consistently travels, we've seen evidence of this, not just with the Jaguars consistently beating the spread in England. You would know about that. But just generally speaking, teams that travel a little bit more often internationally tend to do a little bit better internationally because it turns out this process is really important. Figuring out what your sleep schedule needs to be, figuring out what items you need, figuring out what contingency plans you need, figuring out when and where you need to land, how you can manage logistics, knowing that you can contact people there to figure out what the traffic is, to figure out your schedule. Like there's a million things that you need to do internationally that you don't need to do when you're traveling to like Cincinnati or New York or whatever, that the Vikings have kind of nailed down to a process that makes it as easy as, I mean, it's always difficult, but as easy as possible. Whereas a team that they might be playing, like the Steelers and the Browns, who both have traveled internationally, but I don't think nearly as often as the Vikings, may not have that consistency embedded within kind of their organizational structure. And that turns into results on the field. And so, I think, maybe not in quite exactly that detail, but I think fans have kind of come to understand, like, there are some advantages when it's the Vikings specifically traveling because the other team has the same disadvantages, but not really the same advantages. And the Vikings still get, like 8 home games or whatever they get, right? And so they're not really losing a ton there, but I do know that there are a lot of people kind of in the Rust Belt area that are Vikings fans that were looking forward to a Vikings home game kind of near them. And it was like the first time in like 8 years that there was going to be like a Vikings, are going to be away in the Rust Belt, and so they're going to miss out, and so they're pretty upset about that. And I think that's pretty legitimate.
Yeah. I guess just the way the schedule works, not going to get those games for a bit sooner now, maybe with the extra game, but
right,
another 8 years, But yeah, back-to-back weeks, of course, in Dublin, then in London, which you hopefully gets an advantage for the Vikings, having have stayed out there for the extra time ahead of the Browns. But yeah, I know there's a big buzz. I'm going to Ireland on Friday because I'm off to the college game. Yeah, I know there's huge buzz there for the
that college game is huge every year now, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a good one. Not this the work one, but this year it's 2 ranked teams this year as well. It's Iowa State, Kansas State, so 2 top 25 teams. Week 0, Big 12 Big 12 conference game. So it's going to matter come later on in the year. So very excited for that. But I could sit and talk around that for an hour. But we're not here. Let's carry on talking about the Minnesota Vikings. So let's have a look at some of the transactions, I guess. So maybe some of the bits we haven't touched on. We've touched on a lot of kind of arrivals and change. But is there anybody here that's kind of been coming through the draft or through free agency who we haven't touched on? Arif, who you think is going to make a real big difference for the Vikings this year?
Yeah, I did talk a little bit about Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Okudah a little bit, and I think that they're going to make a difference. It's just we don't know if it's a good difference, right? But I think it's like how that turns out is going to be a really dramatic indicator for how solid that defense can be. And so that's a really key transaction because the Vikings opted against taking a cornerback in the draft. They opted against more high value cornerbacks in the hopes that they could identify some inefficiencies in the market, which every GM is trying to do that. It's kind of hard to lay claim to it. But they've been successful in free agency, so maybe that's giving them a little bit of confidence in, grabbing these guys, right? And so that's been kind of their approach, and that's going to define a lot of what that defense is going to look like. They also did that internally when they extended Theo Jackson and allowed Cameron Bynum to walk. And so Theo Jackson, the Vikings have been doing a lot of 3 safety stuff with Josh Metellus, who's been playing really, really well, Harrison Smith, who is Harrison Smith. And then Cameron Bynum, who had a really, really great season last year, signed to the Colts for, I want to say 14.5 million a year. And the Vikings, knowing that they don't have the most cap space in the world, knew that they would need to rely on the draft or something internal, and they went with Theo Jackson. So that's going to be a really important element too, where we don't have enough information. Just like Isaiah Rodgers looked really good in a small sample, but it's really difficult to extrapolate that out. Here, I think in the draft, I think the one player that's going to end up mattering that we haven't talked about between Jackson and Felton is Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, the 5th round pick. He's rotated a fair amount actually with the starters, which is interesting because there's not a ton of room there. You got Javon Hargrave, you've got Jonathan Allen, you got Harrison Phillips, and yet they still are rotating him in practice with the starters, and he plays kind of this hybrid role, which Flores, I mean, a lot of defensive coordinators nowadays, but Flores especially loves these hybrid roles where you can move people around, where he'll play defensive tackle. He played a tiny amount of nose at Georgia, which we don't want that necessarily, but you've got the versatility. And then he plays outside linebacker, right? And so that allows him to play as an edge rusher, as a defensive tackle. A lot of the edge rushers that the Vikings have they've been practicing at, and they've got some ability to play linebacker. In fact, Andrew Van Ginkel just straight up played linebacker after a couple of injuries to the Vikings unit, and was a blitzing off-ball linebacker instead of an edge rusher. And having that kind of versatility is so important to the Vikings. Ingram-Dawkins represents some level of that versatility, and so he's probably going to play a big role. And then when it comes to depth, Gavin Bartholomew, who's been injured throughout camp, and so we actually don't know what's going to go on with that. He might end up playing a role if we see an injury to Josh Oliver or TJ Hawkinson. They do like having the optionality of a 12-person or 12 personnel offense. Obviously, with Kevin O'Connell, you're passing a lot, and so sometimes you do end up in 3 receiver a lot, but they have put 2 tight ends on the field a fair amount for a pass-happy offense. Oliver is a big part of that because it allows them to check in and out of runs, but if one of them gets injured, they want to maintain that optionality, and so we might see a lot of snaps for somebody like a Kevin Bartholomew, but I think he might be losing the job to some of these undrafted free agent types in camp. So somebody like a Ben Urasek, who is considered kind of a combine snub and then an undrafted free agency snub, he could end up, playing a role in an injury depth situation that people, especially in like, let's say a deep fantasy league or something like that, or, 100-1 anytime touchdown shot, might want to pay attention to in the case that an injury occurs and Bartholomew gets elevated. So, that's or Ben Urasek or whoever, right? Like, I think that's something to kind of keep in mind because they do try to maintain that 12 personnel in those situations. So, yeah, I mean, there's like a couple of interesting moves that they've made, but I think we covered most of them pretty well.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks very much. Let's have a look at the win total. Let's start getting into where we're going to see the Vikings. And, yeah, we've talked about it a lot. Huge year last year, 14-3. Line's 8.5 this year, which is from from Vegas, I guess, is suggesting a big drop off. Arif, how are you feeling about kind of, first of all, is that line fair, do you think, given where they are, and where do you think they're going to end up record wise?
I think given the extremely high year-to-year performance that defenses have, the variance that you get, and the complete unknown that you have at quarterback, I understand like where it's coming from. I would probably push it up half a win or even a full win were I an odds setter, which, I'm not. I think that's pretty clear. It seems like I'd get fleeced if I was, but I would. And, the fact that I have to like interpret these fractional odds because I'm an American.
Apologies.
But the fact that it seems like, the over is giving you a little bit less of a return suggests that the market at least believes a little bit that the Vikings are probably better than 8.5 win team, but not quite enough to earn a push at 9. And so I understand that. I am a little bit more optimistic. I know that whenever you get beat writers, people who cover a team, and ask them about the over-unders, you almost always get the over. And so like, I understand that. Even with that in mind, I think I do want to push the over on 8.5. I think that the defense has a lot of reasons to maintain a top 5-ish, but at least a top 10-ish status. Once that happens and you've got an average level offense, it is, I'm not going to say a certainty, but it is very likely, even given that the Vikings have a very tough schedule, something that's baked into these odds, it is likely, I think, that you get over 8.5 wins in that scenario when you've got, a top 10-ish offense, a top 10-ish defense. It's pretty difficult to fall behind 8.5 wins.
Yeah. So yes, over 6-4 on, under 6-5. So yeah, just marginal difference. And I really like the over. It's one of my ones earlier. We did our initial bets episode a few months ago. I thought the line was crazy. I've spoke against the Vikings last year. Maybe I can't keep going against Kevin. I can't keep going against Kevin O'Connell. Like, he just keeps, no matter what hand he's dealt, he just keeps finding a way to win these football games. They're the kings of the close games. King of the one-score games. So yeah, I'd even go as far to push it over 10.5. I think the Vikings are an 11, 12-win team. I've got them finishing second in the NFC North on a tiebreaker. I've reworked it a bit, but yeah, I know maybe I've gone a bit too far. Maybe 10 wins is more realistic. But Byron, where have you got them?
Yeah, I'm less realistic than you. I'm 13-4. The team's better than last year. I mean, the schedule's tougher maybe, but last year I said the Seahawks 8-5, 8.5 win total was the most disrespectful line, and they won 10 games. I think this is the most disrespectful line on Vegas at the moment. I don't get it. How are the 8.5 team? I'm not sure there's 6 teams better than the Vikings this year. I'm staggered by it, truthfully. I think it's a great line. I would happily take them over 10.5, which is 17-10, so nearly plus 210 in American terminology. I just think I don't get it, truthfully. I don't get why they're 8.5. I think they're a clear over. We'll get to it later, but I think the Vikings win the division as well. They're 7-2 to do so. I know we do have that coming up, so my apologies, but I just don't get it. It's one of them, like I say, I done it with the Seahawks last year, who ended up with 10 wins when they were set to 8.5. I do not get how you think they've fallen off by 6 wins. I think they've improved from last year. Whatever you think of Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy, we've seen Kevin O'Connell get it, and
I think part of the problem here is that the Vikings are built in a way that most models are. I'm not going to say it's difficult to take into account, but would have to be skeptical of. Like you mentioned, king of the close game, and models don't particularly respect close game winning percentage, and generally they shouldn't, right? But you take a look at the last 3 years of Vikings play, and it becomes a pretty compelling narrative that actually this is maybe a unique skill that they have. And that's a choice you have to make, kind of internally on your own, maybe subjectively as a bettor or as an odds maker. But when you're dealing with setting win totals for 32 teams, you just set odds, right?
Yeah.
And so you work on a high level amount of defensive regression. You work on, hey, we're gonna peg this quarterback as if he's a rookie and model it as if he's a rookie.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to incorporate something like Kevin O'Connell's really good at coaching rookies and new quarterbacks and all that. So there's a lot of elements here that I think reasonably push the Vikings above, that win total, but it's really difficult to build a model that has the ability to take a lot of these things into account. And so I can kind of understand like why you'd end up with an 8.5 win total, given kind of what we'd call, I guess, the fundamentals of the Vikings. Like if we were analyzing them like a corporation or a business in the stock market, their fundamentals are average, right? But I think kind of those intangibles are, or maybe just difficult to models, I don't know what to call them, are generally quite positive for the team. And we've seen this happen a little bit before. Tony Dungy was like really, really good at winning close games, or rather Peyton Manning with Tony Dungy was really good at winning close games. And eventually, odds makers took that into account, but it took like 6-7 years of that kind of performance before they decided, what, that sounds pretty real. I guess we're just going to have to do it. But yeah, I think that the Vikings are probably one of those unique teams where you have to say, hey, the close game stuff might be real. And I wrote a piece over at WideLeft.Football about one of the projectors out there, FTN Fantasy, who I love their work. I love their data. Yep. Their almanac predicted that the Vikings actually, I think they took the under on 8.5. And so I responded to it because I think it's really well reasoned, right? Obviously they do good work. It's really well reasoned. And so, I thought that would be kind of a good opportunity to take a look at how models are built and how the Vikings might be resistant to them, or maybe we're looking at this with blinders or stuff like that. So if you don't mind a plug in the middle of a section, check that out at WideLeft.Football.
Absolutely, go for it. I think I've got the Vikings, Packers, and Lions so close, and we'll get to that kind of later on in the episode, but I think it's just going to be these. We talked about it in our intro. This was the strongest division of football last year. I think it's absolutely going to be the strongest and best division of football again this year. And yeah, I'm fully expecting 3 teams to come out the NFC North in the playoffs again. And I just think it's going to be so close between those 3 teams. Apologies, Chicago. Let's have a look on the next bit. Byron's already touched on it a little bit. I used to make the playoffs. It's split. Again, that line, yeah, it's split because UK odds makers are crazy. It's split. Yeah, it's 10 to 11.
Minus 1 on each side, right?
I understand like the way the odds are built and the way that the VIG is in there, but like the reason I was making that face is because if it's even odds to make the playoffs, why is the win total at 8.5? Those are like discordant to me.
Yeah,
I was like, hey, hold on, and maybe it's just because like the NFC drops off pretty quickly. That could be the reason, but that is very interesting to me. Yeah. I would take it. Obviously the playoff odds are they're built into a lot of the divisional stuff, and like you mentioned, it's a really, really good division. But I think that in terms of wins, I think that all 3 of the relevant teams here are going to drop off in wins. I still think they're going to be the best division in football. I do think the Bears will get better, but like low bars, right? But I do think that the strength of the division will relatively fade, but it'll still be the strongest division. It's going to be kind of difficult to make the playoffs, but it's also really difficult for me to think of how many divisions outside of the NFC East are going to send 2 teams, right? Yeah. And you've got a 7-team NFC playoff, right? And so it just seems likely that the division is once again going to send 3 teams to the playoffs. And if that happens, obviously, unless like something crazy happens in Chicago or catastrophic happens to the Vikings, which that's never happened to them before, they would be one of those 3 teams, right? So yeah, I would take yes here. And man, I don't know, like it feels like you've got an arbitrage opportunity here because it's so hard to win 8.5 games and make the playoffs.
Yeah,
I love that. Nothing bad ever happens to the Vikings. Hosting the Wide Left podcast there. Substack, should I say? Newsletter.
Excellent. And then last bit, as Byron sort of touched on earlier, as well, 7-2 to win the division, so plus 350, 14-1 to win the NFC, and 25-1 to win the Super Bowl. How far, Arif, do you think realistically the Vikings can go in 2025?
I think the most likely high-end scenario, right? So if we're talking about like 90th percentile outcome or something like that, I think the most likely positive scenario is that they make the playoffs and then once again go one and done, and then we've got to start talking about Kevin O'Connell being one and done in the playoffs because that's what we talk about. But I think the most likely positive scenario is that they go into the playoffs, they lose a playoff game, and I think that we would have reason to be optimistic after that because you've got a second-year quarterback doing that, right? So I think that's there. Obviously, the ideal scenario, they make it to the Super Bowl, whatever. But I think that you can project them, I think, without going crazy, you can project them to be on the cusp of the NFC Championship game. I think that that's possible, given the strength of the coaching staff and the potential strength of that defense. So that's in there. But it's also, possible. Like we talked a lot about the optimism that we have for coaching quarterbacks and JJ McCarthy. But the truth of the matter is we don't have any information. Like all the scraps of information we have are all positive, right? But it's all positive information. But it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the amount of information we want to have about projecting this kind of player. And so there is kind of a floor outcome here that if he's just a bad quarterback, that you're kind of out of it. But I think the most likely scenario is because, again, if we're talking about how good Kevin O'Connell is, they didn't just randomly acquire a first-round quarterback. They made a decision between the quarterback that performed relatively well for them last year and the quarterback that they have in-house. And I think knowing that they had the information that they had and they made the decision that they did is powerful information for us to work with. And so I think that it's very likely he's an average or better quarterback. And so with that in mind, you've got a pretty good defense, you've got an average better quarterback. I think that you've got a pretty reasonable shot at making a playoff appearance. As for division winning, though, that's actually really tough. Plus 350 is kind of tempting, but I see kind of like the bandwidth of outcomes, right? The 50%, the 25 on either side, that bandwidth of outcomes. The Vikings top end and the Detroit bottom end kind of meeting, right? And so I don't know that there's a lot of overlap between the two, and they're correlated outcomes. We can't treat them independently, but it is difficult to envision a scenario where the Vikings reliably win more than Detroit, unless these injury. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the injury stories in Detroit. They're piling up
again.
Again, it just keeps happening. Yeah. So that's the scenario, I suppose. But other than that, it's difficult for me to project that. And then, of course, you've got like a wrench in the works in the Packers. Now, I'm a little bit more pessimistic about the Packers than most teams, and I think it's pretty clear fair to say I might have a bias about that. But I'm worried about kind of the decisions they made on the offensive line. I alluded to that. I think that they still have some issues on defense, even though they've significantly improved over 2 years ago. And Jordan Love is a very volatile quarterback. I mean, when he's good, he's outstanding, right? He plays at a near MVP level, but he doesn't always play that well. And we've seen stretches of play where he plays that well. And I think that it tricks us that he streaked into, especially in the playoffs, into some pretty high level performances, and allows us to forget some of those lower level performances that are still kind of endemic to what he can do. And so they can throw a wrench into the works. I do think that, to me, they're kind of a third place team in most scenarios that have the volatility to get into first place, but are probably just going to be kind of competing with the Vikings for second. And so with that in mind, it's really difficult for me to take, division odds for the Vikings, even at plus 350, as division winners. But I do think that they would be potentially a high second-ish seed, what do we call the second seed out of a division?
Excellent. Byron, do you think, as you've mentioned, very, very, very high, have you taken the 7-2 already?
Yeah, that's already in. And I'm glad to hear
if you got them as a 12-win team, I don't know why you wouldn't at plus 350, right?
I have 13 wins, 13-4. So definitely. I have the Lions just below that. I think Lions are still good, but I think expecting some fall off from Detroit is absolutely fair. They've had a huge upheaval of the summer / spring. I have the Packers finishing below the Bears, so I can join in the pessimism there. I don't know if you're that pessimistic, but wow. Very close. I have them battling for third rather than battling for second. I've already took the 7-2, and I haven't took the 25-1 on the Super Bowl. I think it's about the right price, but I'd rather back. We've got the Packers at 20-1, we've got the Commanders at 20-1, we've got the 49ers at 20-1, and I know the 49ers have an easy schedule. The 49ers aren't that good of a team this year. I don't think they'll win a lot of games because I think us three might be on their schedule at some point around week 11. So get your strapping on, boys. I don't know outside the Eagles who is a definitively better NFC team than the Vikings. I don't know if I'm just sipping the Kevin O'Connell Kool-Aid too much.
I'm a huge fan of the Commanders. I would definitely take them at 20-1 for the Super Bowl, which, I mean, it would be a lot of fun to see Dan Snyder kind of immediately leave the team and then they succeed.
That would be great. But, I mean, me and Paul are Cowboys fans, so we just expect Cowboys not to win though, so I can root for Jaden Daniels and not hurt myself. Watching Dan Snyder rot in his not yet filled grave would be very filled.
Waiting grave,
and Jaden Daniels going from that rookie year to Super Bowl winner. I wouldn't begrudge Washington, despite being division rivals of our team, truthfully. So, but I just don't think. I think 25-1 is about a fair price. I don't think it's crazy. I think they're built in the right way on the trenches, where you hope that's survives you through January football, and we see how JJ McCarthy does. So I don't think it's crazy 25-1. I'm probably not backing it, but the division I love at 7-2 plus 350.
Excellent, good stuff. That then takes us to the end of our Vikings preview, and that's the last. A little bit revealing how the sausage gets made, because this is the last one we're actually recording, even though you're going to hear the rest of the NFC North come in the next half an hour or so. Arif, thanks ever so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Just give us one last shout out again where we can find your work for the website, newsletter, and podcast.
Go to wideleft.football. Pretty easy to remember, I hope. And then, podcasts, Norsecode, you can type that into whatever podcast, tool that you use, or Viking Squad Show. I didn't pick that name for what it's worth. But that's kind of the relaunch of the Minnesota Football Party that I was on with the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, they produce something every day, Locked On Vikings and the Viking Squad Show on the same feed. So you'll see a bunch of podcasts every day with my friend Luke Braun. And I'm on them. I'm on the feed on Mondays and Thursdays. So check that out.
Excellent. Make sure you go follow Wide Left, Norsecode, and the rest, and support Arif. Arif, thanks so much for joining us. Myself, Byron, and Joe, we're going to preview the Bears, Packers, and Lions. I forgot who the third team was in the division then for a second. Then our fourth team in the division, and we'll finish up the show there. Thanks again to Arif Hasan there from the Norsecode Podcast and also Wide Left newsletter, Substack. Go follow it all. Arif was a great guest. So that's the Vikings done. Let's chat. Let's start in Chicago. Byron, of course, you are almost there. Kind of right there. Yeah. Headlines for the Bears. Unsurprisingly, we're going to talk about Ben Johnson a lot. So been there, done that. Johnson brings Motor City horsepower to NFC North rival Chicago. Are the Bears finally out of hibernation? I suppose, this is the bit to maybe unlock the Bears. We talk about it a lot, and maybe we'll talk about it at the end with the Bears. But we always hammer the Bears about they've never had that 4,000-yard passing quarterback, which in 2025, in the way the NFL's gone, he's just absolutely fucking insane, isn't it? At this point, is Ben Johnson going to be able to kind of change this offense? Because we were expecting big things last year. Because again, the moves that they made, the names that they had, just didn't quite work, and primarily was down to the offensive line. But is Ben Johnson going to be able to kind of just lift and shift what he did in Detroit and implement it in Chicago? Or is there a little bit more to it than that?
I think there's definitely a lot more to it than that. But, we'll get to it with some of our coming headlines about the talent that's joined the team. But I think in itself, Ben Johnson is a huge get. I don't think it's as easy as just plug and play, but he's shown to be an innovative scheme caller, innovative play caller who can get the best out of the talent available to him, however that may be. But you don't have Detroit's structure immediately. Again, we will get to the talents come in, but I don't know if the Bears have got that whole line in place yet. They've made changes, but we don't know if it's there. What I do like is that he surrounded himself with experience. This is the first time head coach brought in Antoine Randall over as a wide receivers coach. Eric Bieniemy comes in as running backs coach. Dennis Allen comes in as DC. These are all people who've had jobs at that level or above in their NFL career. I think that's just a really smart move and in a way, it kind of touched on what the Bears got wrong last year, where they just had Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent in the quarterback's room. There was no veteran. This year they've got Case Keenum in there. There was all the stuff came out earlier this year about Caleb Williams wasn't shown how to watch film at the pro level, which you think, seeing some of the pushback was, well, he's the first overall pick. He should know how to do that. It's like, he shouldn't. Maybe he should know how to do it more. But it doesn't hurt to help, does it? Like, your entire franchise is basically tied to Caleb Williams being a franchise quarterback. Maybe make sure he can get the best out of it. I think it's just absolute wheels up for Chicago. This has got to be the most exciting head coach hire they've had in I don't know how long. I think Ben Johnson was the best coach on the market. Most exciting coach on the market, certainly. I mean, you could make arguments maybe like Pete Carroll in terms of having the know-how and the experience, but I think long-term, I don't think there's anybody I would have picked in the market over Ben Johnson with what he's done in Detroit. So hopefully wheels up and, hopefully bring that Motor City horsepower along with him.
And I think it makes it exciting that it's still in the division. I think he's got that chippiness about him. I'm always wary of a rookie head coach who's not done anything to but you'd rather have that than having the demeanor that we know. It makes the Bears a lot more fun. I think we were here last year being like, they've made, they got the quarterback in and they've made progress, but it was like, what are they doing with this head coach? Why do they keep Matt Eberflus? Get this young, exciting head coach with the QB, and can you do something what he did with Jared Goff, another former first rounder, where the Rams were happy to give him away. I know they got Matt Stafford in return, but they gave up on that project, and I think Ben Johnson turned it around with everyone else. So you're at least giving Caleb Williams the shot that if it doesn't work, like this year, I think again it's what the expectations are. But if he doesn't do it in the next year or two, maybe 3 years, he's not where like Jared Goff level this man. But is it Caleb Williams the issue, not rather than the Chicago organization, which there was all the headlines with Caleb and his dad that they didn't want to go there because it's where QBs go to die, which is fairly true. But now it shouldn't be. So at least they've given him that opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like it's easy, like clickbait stuff, and easy to get views and interactions with online, just Caleb bashing stuff. And I think we've seen that with the videos of him missing the net throwing and stuff like that. And I think that's just easy stuff. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what Ben Johnson can do. And let's talk a little bit, I suppose, about probably the biggest thing that's changed in Chicago in terms of the roster. Bare necessities, Chicago fine Tooney there inside of the offensive line. Good combination of headlines put together there, Joe. Lions trade for Joe Tooney and bringing Joe Jackson and Drew Dolman in free agency. Can Caleb get his claws back with O-line overhaul? Probably one of the biggest reasons why we saw Caleb Williams struggle at times last year was the fact he was just running for his life a lot of the time and getting smashed into the ground. Like, he was just getting sacked time after time after time. Also, an element of him maybe he holds the ball on a little bit too long at times, but it doesn't help if your old line is just not blocking. And that's kind of the situation we got into with Chicago last year. Do you think they've done enough? Is this going to give him kind of that foundation to have a bit of time back there where then he can make those magic moments happen?
I mean, if they haven't done enough, I'm not sure what enough would look like, really. Jonah Jackson, obviously, a bit of a question mark. Coming off some injury years. But Drew Dolman, I think, is as good of a center as you can get in free agency, certainly. Joe Tooney, obviously, is maybe not Hall of Famer, but probably is a Hall of Famer, truthfully. Certainly an all-pro level guard for a number of years. I think you've got some questions at the tackle spot still. I don't think it's fully decided who's going to play which side and who's going to even start on either side. So there is some question marks, but I think when you go from what they had last year to what they have this year, I think it's kind of night and day in terms of just getting a high-level floor in place. We'll see if they can reach a ceiling outcome. But I do think, along with that, we mentioned Caleb Williams running for his life. Caleb Williams didn't help himself an awful lot. His ability to take sacks in the non-positive sense was, pretty bad. In fantasy points data, who I look at an awful lot, I think they have the best data suite available. 107 quarterbacks in their time frame have cleared 375 dropbacks in a single season. Caleb Williams' pressure to sack ratio of 30% is 107th in that time. So if you got pressure on Caleb Williams, he was getting sacked at a rate more than any quarterback in NFL history. He doesn't strike me as the sort of player that should allow that. He can move. Yeah. I just think he just held on to he was just trying to make things happen too much. And, you've got to be able to give up on a play. A sack, it's not an interception, but it's close to it in terms of killing a drive off for you. So I think, they have improved things around him, but he needs to improve things around it within himself as well. You're not going to get 5 seconds to throw the ball. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter who your line is. It's not going to happen. So he needs to, and I think Ben Johnson will drill this into him. You've got to be able to give up on a play. You've got to hit your first reads. You're not here to scramble. You're not at college anymore. Like, everybody's fast. Everybody's quick. Everybody's an elite athlete. So I think Caleb Williams has to undertake that himself. And the all-line additions will help massively, though.
Yeah, and we've got to remember, Caleb Williams played in the dying days of the Pac-12, where the games were just shootouts all the time. Pac-12 after dark, sad that it's gone, but they were just great games, high-scoring games, constantly. And not a lot of defense being played, and typically quarterbacks just hold on to the ball, do what they wanted, and that was always a worry for me coming out that the transition to the NFL. There's no doubt in the kind of the ability he's got it. We'll see now what happens year 2. He took 68 sacks last year, which is crazy, isn't it? And that's it's not sustainable on your body. Never mind in terms of what that does for a performance perspective and field position and stuff like that. So big step up needed, I think, from Caleb. But that will only happen if that revamped O-line does.
I was going to say, good. Like with John Jackson. I know Byron's mentioned that. He had a very rough year last year, and I think he's the left tackle. I think there's 3 players currently in competition for that. You'd never really want, if you want a settled left tackle. I feel like Dino Wright is set right, but the left tackle, that is a worry. But it feels like a lot of these teams that have, the interior or line is where a lot of teams have focused on, just with some of the players coming through. So, fingers crossed that he gets the opportunity, and who knows, 4,000 yards might be on the table.
Could be. I mean, I think we'll save that till the end. This is a little bit of discussion about that, I think. No spoilers. Loveland in the air. Bears had their attacking options with Michigan tight end. Cost Loveland and Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden III. How will the target share between all the weapons go? Because it's not just those two guys, is it? We've got DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, of course, as well, who's a pretty good tight end anyway. How do you see all that kind of, playing out?
I think Rome Odunze is going to be wide receiver 1. DJ Moore might get there in terms of targets, but I think in terms of yardage, touchdowns, receptions, I'm looking at Rome Odunze stepping up this year. Again, last year wasn't exactly shining for Odunze as a rookie, especially when you compare like Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, kind of thing Marvin Harrison suffered from. Is like, oh, look at these guys, and Lad McConkey as well. But again, I'm going to put a lot more of the blame on basically everybody to Caleb Williams' play last year. Again, we can tag the O-line in there. We can tag the offensive coaching last year, but Caleb Williams didn't give his players, his wide receivers, a chance to succeed last year, in my opinion. And I was someone who was high on Caleb Williams, but he just didn't. I am really interested to see where kind of Luther Burden picks up on this offense, because he's electric. I think he forces more missed tackles for a wide receiver than basically anybody in this draft class. If he gets the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays. So does that come at the expense of DJ Moore as the season goes along? DJ Moore obviously is a big cap guy. I think he's cuttable after this season. We'll see. I'm not sure how much they want to be carrying 3 big name and eventually big pay wide receivers. I think Loveland's just going to take Komet's job. I'm sure Komet will contribute at times, but I had this as our pre-draft talk. I had Costa Loveland as tight end 1. I think he's so pro-ready. I think that's exactly what a tight end should be in this day and age. I think he can do a Stan Laporta type rookie season. Maybe a Brock Bowers is out of the question because the target competition is too fierce. But, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets 10 touchdowns. Costa Loveland, I just think he's ready for it. So, yeah, I think Odunze would be my wide receiver 1 here. In fantasy, I'm fading DJ Moore because he goes a lot earlier than Odunze and Luther Burden. I like Luther Burden as a late round. I think he goes, 11th round, 12th round. And just someone who I think will pick up as the season goes along. And come the end of the season, will probably have like league winner potential.
Yeah, I wonder if you look at how the lines work. Is he going to play the Jameson Williams kind of role, especially this first year? I think they might go a lot of 2 tight end formation stats, but you might just get Moore and Odunze, and then it's not too bad having a second rounder coming off to help them guys. And I think it's going to. I'm the same. I think Rome Odunze, the reports coming from camp are all positive. I think he's going to have a huge year. He's going to make that leap in second year. I think also having Keenan Allen out the locker room as well. Obviously, he only could do one thing for the Bears, and he felt like he stopped Odunze with what he could do as well. And there was reports that it wasn't the most positive wide receiver room. So maybe to get what the progress stoppers out of there, Odunze. And I think with Burden, I'm not expecting a huge year. I think he's still. There's a reason why he wasn't taken the first round, and I don't think it really was considered, above the other first rounders who went. But I can see as like a Jameson Williams, maybe the first year's maybe not playing as much, but the progress going through. But them electric players, he could certainly contribute to that team and help them in the winning ways.
Excellent. Let's move on to number 4. Is Dennis Allen key to Chicago's success? Allen Key gags, is that where we're at? Former Saints head coach moves from the Big Easy to the Windy City to become defensive coordinator. Can Dennis blow up a storm, or will he be a menace to a successful Bears season? Very good. What do we reckon? So it was a miserable, apart from the first 2 weeks, it was a miserable 2024 season for Dennis Allen. And he was relieved of his duties. But he's a really, really good defensive coordinator. Not a great head coach, a great defensive coordinator. How do we think he's going to take to Chicago with kind of the pieces that they've got?
Well, I do think probably, to be fair, the only way is up. They were 27th in yardage last year, 13th in scoring, which isn't so bad, I will say. But, they added Grady Jarrett, they added Deo, Eddie Bingo. I just think that's they needed depth on that defense. So, good to Chicago have a bit of a deep dish of defenders available.
Dear, Jesus.
That was my chosen pun. I'm glad that Joe went with Dennis Allen Key. No, I don't think they've done too much on defense. There's a lot of later round draft picks who've come in and UDFAs who could contribute to that core. But I think just getting Jarrett and Odubingo in there is a big boost. You haven't lost anyone notable on defense. So I like Dennis Allen a lot as a DC like yourself. And again, someone who's experienced, someone that Ben Johnson isn't going to have to tell how to do the job, isn't going to have to really watch over. I think it's going to be very much, I'm not going to say it's Mike Dicker and Buddy Ryan, but like I think it might be two kind of hopefully get along better, certainly. I can see them kind of just being left to their own devices. Ben Johnson will oversee everything on offense, handle being everything, and I think you can trust Dennis Allen to keep on top of that defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a great hire. And we think 2 years ago that, we all were waxing praises about the Bears defense. That's why Matt Eberflus kept his job. So they haven't lost too many players. They've still got Montez Sweat, who can be a premium edge rusher. It's not great that it sounds like Jalen Johnson, who got a nice contract last year. He's out for week 1. You would want these players fit. But, with that experience, we're getting that kind of defensive coordinator who doesn't have to now worry about his head coaching duty. I think, it could be a positive for the Bears. And the Bears are such a weird team to me. I think I would say they're the biggest boom or bust in the league, where it's so hard to figure out where they're going to sit. Like, are they going to have a great year and challenge for the NFC North? I can see that, but can I see them having seasons how the last few years? I think they could go anywhere. And I think Dennis Allen and that defense, just to keep them in games, especially to start the season where Caleb Williams learning a new offense and they've got some young players and this new offensive line, just keep them in games where they start stealing them wins, because it feels like the Bears were the opposite, where they would lose these tight games. We saw that the Commanders last year, where you just need change 2 or 3 of them, and then suddenly you're winning 10, 11 games a year instead of 6 or 7. So, I think it's hugely important with how successful this Bears team is.
Yeah, so we saw him plenty, for times when before he took the main job in New Orleans. How many times the Saints are kind of like top 5, ranked defense. So I'm expecting good things from Dennis Allen. So we will see. Transactions. Excellent. I did a terrible job of transitioning that, Joe. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, key transactions then. And we've talked about a few ins and outs with the trades and the moves on the other line. You mentioned Grady Jarrett there. Anyone we haven't kind of touched on who you think is going to make a big, big difference for the Bears?
I think of the players we've not talked about. I think, not named by name, but Ozzy Trapillo, the left tackle in the second round. I think he's going to be an interesting one. I think ideally they want him to take Braxton Jones' job at left tackle. Braxton Jones in the contract year. So I think if they can get him into position to be a starter in 26, whether that means he comes in mid this season or even start the season, I don't think they've fully decided yet. I presume it's Braxton Jones to start just because, he's already got the job. I think that's going to be a big ticket for the Bears' future. And again, mentioned every 7th round rookie, running back is looking good. Kyle Monongai, getting some big hype after week 1 preseason. So we'll see how that goes. I think that running back room is kind of up in the air. Someone could come in and make an instant impact. I don't think Ben Johnson is married to DeAndre Swift. Obviously, Roshan Johnson, Monongai, Travis Homer. It's not. There's no Saquon Barkley in there, is there? So there is an opportunity if you can come in and hit the ground running to, make an impact.
Yeah, I really, really like Ozzy Trapillo. You mentioned that first one you mentioned next. So he's played a lot. He's played at left tackle and right tackle in college, mainly the last 2 years at right tackle for Boston College. I was really hoping he'd be one that maybe Dallas would be in the mix for, and maybe about 3rd round, but obviously he went a bit earlier than that. And I think he'd be a real, real solid player. Like when he gets in, I don't think he's getting out anytime soon. He's a big guy, and all these old linemen out, but he's like 6'8". He's a massive guy, and he's had plenty of starts at left and either tackle position. So I think he should be able to take it to the NFL quite well. Anyone else, Joe, before we move on?
No, I was going to mention the 7th round running back. That's why I was laughing as well, because Byron mentioned the start of the thing. It's just like such in the air with Swift. Is he finally going to come good, or is he just going to let everyone down on fantasy again and the Bears? Because it feels like every year there's always hope, and we thought he was going to get replaced, but he wasn't. So we'll see. But yeah, after we've talked about everyone else.
Cool. Good stuff then. Let's have a look at our win totals. I jumped a bit too early then, and we'll get Byron back in line on the screen. 8.5 wins for the Bears. Over under 8.5. 5-4 to hit the over. 6-4 on to hit the under. So it feels like Vegas has got them right on 8 wins. Where have you got them, guys?
13-4, yeah. No. No, I'm at 9-8, so I probably wouldn't take this over just because it's so close, and this division is vicious. But yeah, I think 8-9 wins is exactly right. Yeah, I struggle to see them getting like 5 wins like they did last year. I would lean the over, but it would be a tiny little lean and one I'm not backing financially.
I was going to say I've got that 8 wins, so basically I'm just agreeing with everybody, just with the 1 less win. It's just that division. I think if they win any other division, maybe like 1-2, you'd be like, ooh, if they win the NFC South, for example, or AFC South, I think most teams, I would think they would be one of the favourites. So it's just unfortunate that they're in a division with 3 other great teams and that schedule.
Yeah, I think they've got a very, very difficult start to the season as well, which I suppose is not ideal if you've got a new coach and stuff like that. I have an 8 and 9 as well. 8 and 9 bottom of the division. So I'm expecting it to be a pretty strong division again if 8 and 9's finishing bottom. I think they will make big strides forward. I think they'll be a much better team, but it won't have the massive jump in wins that you might hope for. I think that start's rough. You've got Vikings, Bears, week 1, week 2. Cowboys week 3 at home, but
they're not playing themselves week 2, by the way. They're playing the Lions.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Vikings, Lions, sorry. Cowboys, and then they got a couple of wins. They've got the Raiders and Saints up until week 7. The Commanders, Ravens, Bengals. It's just not. It's a pretty tough schedule. There's not many easy. There's not many kind of gimme wins on there, and I suppose you don't get gimme wins in the NFL too often. But you know what I mean. Like, I think you have to win some games where I don't think they're going to be. There'll be a lot of games they'll have to win it to not be favourites for to win 8 wins. But yeah, I just think it's a really rough road, and that's why I just think they're going to get a struggle to get. It'll be a struggle to get over 500 for the Chicago Bears this year.
Yeah, that's fair.
Cool, excellent. And yes, there is, Joe, the Dennis Allen revenge game in there, as we mentioned in week 7 against the Saints. Let's have a look then at odds to make the playoffs. So 7-4, so just short of 2-1 to make the playoffs. 9-4 on to miss. Byron, have you got them getting in at 9 and 8?
No, I haven't, just missing out.
So yeah, I'm saying, just missing out the playoffs. 8 and 9 is not going to get you in. Division winners 5-1 to win the divisions. So they are rank outsiders, but only 5-1. Conference 16-1 and 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. When they're the 4th ranked, the longest odds to win the division, feels like 40-1 to win the Super Bowl is really short.
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily too far out either, though. I think he might be pushing it to say the Bears can win the Super Bowl, but if they get to the playoffs, if that defense gets cooking, I'm not backing it at 40-1. I don't mind that price on them making the playoffs at 7-4. A little longer, I think I'd be backing it, even though I don't have them in. I don't think they need that much to go right to make it. The only thing is the division, again, like we just said. So I don't think it's wild to think they could win 10 games. Like I say, I have them at 9. It's not the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, I actually don't mind. I don't mind that division odds, to be honest. When I saw 5-1, because I think they've got a chance. I think the other teams may have digressed. We don't know what's happened with the Lions, with the Packers, and with the Vikings. It's all like there's plenty of changes there, and I think it's a bit up in the air. And the schedule, they could sneak a few wins, and 5-1. I don't think it's too bad for a Bears team, which I think they're actually a decent team this year. Like the last 2 years, I've always been like, stay away from the Bears. I don't think if their time's ready. But this year, I'm like, it could actually happen. So, I don't mind the 5-1.
I think so. That we talked about the schedule. Then the final 5 games: Packers, so they play the Cleveland Browns. So Packers, Browns, Packers, Niners, Lions. Niners in week 17 potentially. For expecting them to be good, like we talked about in our NFC West preview. That Niners trying to get number 1 seed or win the division. Lions again, if we're expecting the division to be tight, the Lions to be up there. That's potentially a game again if the Lions are in the mix for number 1 seed and to win the division at that point. it's just a really difficult end, and to get you have to win a few of them games, aren't you? I think
But then you could always flip it that the playing teams in the division to win it. If they beat the Packers and go 1-1 and beat the Lions, then that could be like the one division that way. So you can turn it around.
All right, now it's your turn to be in on the Bears, Joe. I'm in on the Bears, and I've got an 8 and 9. Right, let's move on to the Detroit Lions instead of half in, half out, Joe. Move on to the Detroit Lions. Yeah, Lions lose main man. Well, 2 of them went, didn't they? But main man. Lions hoping not to lose themselves. Very good. On offense. Joe, what are we doing? You can't do that while I'm reading the headline. Take the controls off him, Byron. Right, Lions hoping not to lose themselves on offense with Ben Johnson leaving for Chicago. John Morton promoted to OC. Are we expecting any changes? So we talked about kind of Ben Johnson, moving that offense to Chicago, but I talked about the Bears there. But let's talk about the impact on the Lions. How hard is that then to transition for what kind of Ben Johnson's built there and that style of offense and the way they go about it for somebody else to kind of step in because they've gone from obviously promote from within approach?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be easy, certainly. I think what helps, obviously, is Dan Campbell's still there. And whether he's scheming the plays or not, I think he has a philosophy of how he wants games to be called, how he wants plays to go. I don't think the Lions are going to stop being aggressive. I don't think the 4th down decision making is going to change very much. I think that's still going to be we're going to keep our foot to your throat and we're going to keep pushing you. Whether John Morton is as good of an OC and as good of a schemer as Ben Johnson obviously remains to be seen. I think it's fair to expect some drop-off. To what level is really tough to decide, though. I've seen a lot of, I think the kids call it copium of Lions fans of like, well, I don't think they're going to change what they're doing because Ben Johnson's left. It's like, yeah, but Ben Johnson is obviously very good. That's why he's a head coach now. Like, you can't just expect someone because he's already in the building to automatically have his exact skill set and his ability to, like I said, scheme these plays and players open. So I think it's fair to expect some kind of regression to, from top of the league offensive play calling to somewhere lower than that. I don't think it'll be bottom. I don't think even middle of the league would probably be enough to ding them, though. So, yeah, I think it's fair to expect a regression of some sort.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about it in the next headline as well. They've also lost a few players as well, where the strength is. But like we talked about with the Buccaneers, I like when they promote within the system. I know there seems to be some reports, or just looking at the press conferences, that some of the Lions, especially Dan Campbell, is getting a bit annoyed that it seems like everyone's saying it was all Ben Johnson who masterminded this offense, and he was the reason why it works instead of Dan Campbell. So, fired up Dan Campbell is always fun to see, and I wonder if they're going to come out swinging and to prove that, yeah, I'm the guy, not that Ben Johnson over in Chicago.
Given kind of what the bar has been for Dan Campbell, what does a fired up Dan Campbell look like? I think he's just constantly fired up.
Well, doesn't he have like four espresso coffees as his drink? So local Starbucks, I think, are going to be in good business because I dread to think what his morning order is now. And going into week 2 when it's hosting Ben Johnson, I think it's just going to be IV in it.
Excellent. Let's talk about the next one. New front bumper at Ford Field. Lions lose a number of key starters on O-line as Ragnar retires and Zeitler leaves in free agency. Will the Lions' strength now become a weakness? It's tough, isn't it, to lose experienced players like that off an offensive line. Obviously, it was everything that the offense was built off, what that O-line was capable of doing. Of course, it still has some studs, particularly at the ends in Sewell and Taylor Decker. But yeah, what do we think about kind of the interior changing in the Lions and possibly changing for the worse?
Yeah, I think Ragnar especially is. Yeah, we talked about his Tristan Wirfs on a recent episode of kind of being irreplaceable. We'll see if Frank Ragnar is, but he certainly played incredibly high level the last 3 or 4 years. It's going to be very tough to replace. Like you say, losing Zeitler as well. Tate Ratledge, draft pick, came in for some praise from Dan Campbell this week, saying he looks like he's pro ready already. He was a 2nd round pick, so you hope there's not a huge drop off there, but when you've had, again, you're going from kind of what you've got in Ben Johnson there, from the top level to anything unknown, is obviously a huge question mark. You hope that these players are going to be ready to hit the ground running, but, Tate Ratledge was drafted as maybe Zeitler's replacement, but you wouldn't have Glasgow moving around, and now you've got to cope with that. So you do lose your top end, but you also lose that bit of depth that you had previously with, your elite players retiring. Or an elite player retiring and Zeitler going to Tennessee. So I think, again, you have to expect some kind of drop-off there because it's hard to cope with it, and especially losing URC at the same time.
Yeah, I do worry about, especially in the interior with, Goff being the quarterback. Obviously no quarterback likes pressure up the middle. But I just worry about that. And then the running game, I think Gibbs is going to have a big year. I think, with Montgomery, with that kind of running style, is not having the big guys in the middle going to hurt him. So I'm curious, when you look at it's more looking big picture with the Lions. So you think, the Vikings, we'll talk about it as we'll just talk about it, like upgraded the defensive tackles, the Eagles with Jalen Carter, the Rams. These teams have started to attack these interior lines. So to lose them two key players, it might not affect them too much in the regular season, but when it's the big show in the playoffs, that's when you might see it and where Goff could struggle, because we saw with a lot of teams last year where suddenly the offensive line was just crumbled and, it was see you later. So, I think it could be not massive to begin with, but I think it's something to definitely be aware of and how the Lions might change their offensive scheme.
Yeah, that's a Ratledge as well. Absolutely elite mullet. It's got to be a top 3 mullet in sports, probably. It's incredible. Interesting to see how he does, but he's a 3-year starter at Georgia as well. So it's been his big teams, played plenty of big games. So we'll see how he takes to the big leagues. Headline number 3, will Kevin Shepherd in a new era for Lions D? Another coordinator taken from the Pride is Glenn Lees for New York. From linebacker to Lion, Leader Shepherd promoted to DC. Same question, I guess, as what we talked about with Ben Johnson. And it's hard, and I don't think we've seen this in terms of both coordinators going for great reasons since the Eagles a couple of years ago when Gannon and Steichen got there. Both left after the Eagles were sadly beaten in the Super Bowl. And then the Eagles struggled, but it didn't kind of kick in until the second half of the season, really, those struggles for the Eagles. First of all, what do we think the defense is going to look like? And do we think this is going to, overall, the loss of both of these guys going to really hit the Lions hard? A lot of questions there. Apologies. Bad podcasting.
I think it's a huge loss losing Aaron Glenn. Just like Ben Johnson, again, you lose one of the top DCs in the league. And I don't know much about Kelvin Shepherd. I know enough that his name's Kelvin, at least, not Kevin, but I'm not sure who I'm looking at there. But hopefully that's the only Elwood dishing out today.
How's that set up then? Cheers, Joe.
The talent is still really good on the offense, though. Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Kirby. They added DJ Reed. Cornerback, Aiden Hutchinson is back and healthy. And do you know Aiden Hutchinson's favourite defensive player of the year, which I think is crazy? I think he's really good, but he's coming off a major injury. I couldn't believe when I seen he was favourite last night. There's a few of them who were bunched together, to be fair, but he was on DraftKings last night. Yeah. 7-1.
I wonder if that's like the story around it, though. Like, if he has a great year, the headliners come back and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
totally agree.
There's an award for that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think they call it bounce back player of the year, is it, or something like that, or returning from injury? No, comeback. That's it exactly. Yeah, you're right. I'd have loved to see them to add somebody opposite Aiden Hutchinson and maybe help him get up to speed a little throughout the season. There is a rookie that we'll mention on the depth chart or the transactions piece who maybe will, but yeah, I think on paper the defense is still really good. If they can just avoid having 35 injured defensive players every week, I think that'll be a huge addition.
Not started off well, has it?
No, not great. No, not great. But see how the season.
Well, while you mentioned that, Simon, so we might as well just move to the next one, Paul. And,
another season of team running on fumes. After injuries plagued the Lions last year, this offseason did not start well with Owunzakiri and Rekestra Jr. already out for the season. I did a terrible job, and you caught me so off guard by flipping the headline. Carry on talking about the injuries, guys. Go on.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue as well with the Lions is they had a lot of big injuries in the middle of last year. So McNeil's not going to be back for a couple of months. That's another defensive tackle. Rodriguez as well. They don't think he's going to come back for a couple of months. So it's not just players who are getting injured now, it's the players who are returning from last year. And we mentioned Hutchinson, which it was a leg break, if that's right. So it's not as bad. Like they're easy to come back from, but like the other ones are going to take time to get up to speed. And you've lost a few players. I do like the addition of DJ Reed. Just talking about the defense, I think he gets slept on how good of a cornerback he is. Even last year there was some debates. Was he actually the better quarterback versus Sauce? So to get him in, which was an issue for the Lions a few years back, they brought a few players in. Obviously lost Carlton Davis this summer as well. So I think DJ Reed is an upgrade. But yeah, they just got to start hitting on some of these players, and obviously with Williams, the defensive tackle in the first round as well. I think that helps with it. Owuzarike, but he was going to take over McNeil for the start of this year. So you just don't need to keep going last year because, we've seen teams you can cope for so long, but eventually it does catch up with you. So you just, fingers crossed you have to stay fit because, I know I've heard lines that fans already some saying, oh, is the opportunity already gone for the Lions, which I think is a bit ridiculous with the players they've got. But, sooner or later, they've got to start paying some of these young players when Hutchinson's getting paid. So they need to, hopefully this year is the year where everyone stays fit.
I do love that. That is a fan base that has had a lot of bad times in their life. They're like, well, we've had 2 years of good football. It must be ending soon. I just love that. Trust Brad Holmes. Trust Dan Campbell, guys. It's not going away.
Yeah. That's for sure. Do you feel like that's had 2 really, really good opportunities, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it hurts, yeah.
They were there, that NFC Championship game, in control against the Niners. And then, obviously, defense injuries killed them last year, but to be kind of overwhelming home favourite in the divisional round at the playoffs, having the bye, and then getting beat quite comfortably in the end by the Commanders, the rookie quarterback. Ooh.
And I don't want to touch on this too much. I didn't want to break out a segment for it, but Jared Goff in that Commanders game was appalling. The
worst time to have his worst game.
Well, we talk a lot about that with Sam Darnold, who had his 2 worst games of the season, the last 2 weeks of the season. I haven't heard a peep about it in the terms of Jared Goff. Jared Goff he completed roughly 50% of his passes, 3 interceptions. He was horrendous. And again, the lights came on, biggest moment, things got difficult, and Jared Goff for us. I know it's not exactly the point we're making here, but we don't have a special point for it anywhere else in the show. I think there's a justification for being a little concerned.
Yeah, if we had loads of people that watch this show, you'd be getting killed online for saying that about Jared Goff.
That's fine. We'll clip it. I'll try and get some hate.
That's why we do it.
It's just true.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a bit worried that to the win, and it's not because they're not good and they're not great. I feel like those 2 just golden opportunities, and they don't come along that often for teams like the Detroit Lions. No disrespect, tinge of disrespect to it, but you know what I mean. Right, let's move on to the key transactions. Again, same question. Again, we've talked about a lot there, but anyone we've not kind of touched on who we think is actually going to make a huge impact or be a big influence on the Lions' 2025 season?
So one I kind of hinted at in terms of being opposite Aiden Hutchinson was a 6th round pick, Ahmed Hassanian, who has been getting rave reviews all through training camp. As a very interesting story, I'd recommend people read up on him. But yeah, Dan Campbell loves him. He's a pure Detroit Lion when you, again, read his story of his pre-draft and coming straight to Detroit. 6th round picks don't normally hit instantly, but I don't know. I just have a kind of good vibe about this guy. I think he's got a strong character. He'll run through brick walls, no problem. I think he's an exact Dan Campbell type of player. whether they end up adding someone like Zadarius Smith, who's still a free agent, they had in last year opposite Aiden Hutchinson, we'll see. But I really hope this guy gets snaps early and can kind of, hit the ground running, certainly.
Yeah, 9.5 sacks last year for Boise State, who were a college football playoff team.
Yeah.
See how he gets on. But yeah, I think they do need a bit more help on that D line, just because Hutchinson's going to get that attention, especially early on as well, just because you're not going to have kind of McNeil and things like that to kind of, other defenses to worry about. So yeah, I like Big Hutchinson to have a huge season. We'll get to that later on, but yeah, I just think maybe need some more. Maybe that's a move, or I don't know, someone crazy gets cut or something in the next few weeks that you pick up. I don't know. Joe, go on, Byron. Sorry.
Well, I didn't want to steal. If Joe's got one, I'll let Joe go. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm curious how Isaac Tesla is going to play in this offense as well. He is behind quite a few players, but some of the reports and just the kind of comparison he was like, and I don't think he's going to be a Puka Nacua, but that was one of the comps he had. But you never know with these first rounders. But he's always going to be behind Amon-Ra Brown, Jameson Williams, Tim Patrick. But then he's up. I think he could challenge definitely Tim Patrick. I'm curious what they're going to do with Jameson Williams. I don't think they're going to pay him in the next year or so. I think he could be one of them casualties where like I mentioned, they're paying quite a lot of players. Are going to be paying Aiden Hutchinson. So I'm curious how they're going to use him this year. But yeah, Isaac Tesla is definitely one where maybe not straight away, but if there's a few injuries or Tim Patrick is not the old Tim Patrick, he could certainly get to that wide receiver free. And so I think it could be an interesting rookie season, but definitely one to watch this year later on, and maybe in the years going forward as well.
That's exactly who I wanted to shout out, Isaac Tesla. And I'm so glad you mentioned Puka Nacua, because it meant I didn't have to. But you know what? Watching him in that preseason game, you can kind of see it. I don't think he's going to have Puka Nacua's impact because, he's going to a different receiving room, et cetera, but boy, he looked ready for the pros already. Pick 70, I think they've got themselves a little bargain there. And you mentioned Tim Patrick. Do you know Tim Patrick was 6th in comeback player of the year voting last year? What the hell? He had 394 receiving yards. I was looking this up last night to look at the history of comeback player of the year, basically, to see if JJ McCarthy might be eligible as my player bet. I decided he wasn't, so I didn't list him. But yeah, I noticed when I was looking through them, Tim Patrick finished 6th last year in Comeback Player of the Year award, which is one of the wildest things I think I've ever seen in NFL voting.
Yeah. I mean, was it a big year? Was there many candidates last year?
Top 5 were Burrow, Dobbins, Darnold, DeMar Hamlin, weirdly, Christian Gonzalez. And then after Tim Patrick, the infamous Tim Patrick, you had Aaron Rodgers, Nick Chubb, Cam Hayward, Kyler Murray. So, I mean, I'm not saying there's incredible options. 15th was Saquon Barkley.
Coming back from the Giants.
Being a New York Giant.
Time on the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, and 26th was Anthony Richardson.
He coming back. He got back in the game he came out from because he was tired.
Yeah, came back from injury. To more injury. Some weird players on that list, to be fair. But yeah, still struck me as very weird. Tim Patrick was 6th. I wouldn't have guessed he had a single vote if you had to ask me.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's move into win totals for the Lions. Over under 10.5. Even money you can get on the Detroit Lions to get to 10.5 or more wins. So 11. Or 13-10 on to hit the under. So that seems to be leaning on 10 wins for the Lions. This is a 15-win team from 2025. Where have you guys got them?
This is a 15-win team who has no coordinators left and half its O-line gone. Yeah, I have them at 11-6. I had them really high to start the offseason, and it's just gradually chipped away to 11 now. I think that's probably where I'll settle come season time. So I have them just over. Again, probably not one I'm going to take. I think a couple more injuries, and that's going to lean much more towards a 10.
I had them 12-5 last time I ran mine, but again, I feel more comfortable with them at 11-6, which is crazy. It's just one game, but yeah. I think it's going to be a really, really good division again. And I think naturally it's just hard. It doesn't mean they're bad. I'm not saying they're a bad football team. Far from it. It's just hard losing that many key people. It really is. It's not. We don't see it often in the NFL where teams, there's rarities of teams that can kind of keep going through that.
And if you're winning 11 games, you're definitely not a bad football team either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would take 11 wins every year for the Cowboys.
Just trying to preempt the Detroit versus everybody thing that will inevitably come at me.
The world hates us.
Yeah, everybody gets. Even though I don't think I've ever met a single person ever who dislikes, never mind hates, the Detroit Lions, including fans of teams in their own division. So, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to create siege mentality, I guess. But everybody loves Detroit. It's just, yeah. Joe, where have you got him?
Yeah, my original on Adam 12-5. I think if I did it again, I would be some to you guys 10 or 11 wins. I think doing these previews is I think I was a little bit too low on the Vikings. So yeah, on my original one, I've got them 12. That might change when I do one just before I start the season again. But yeah, I think it's similar. So I'll probably go. I'll probably go the over evens, the 11 wins, but I think it's gonna be tight.
Yeah, I felt confident, again, earlier in the year, confident with a bet, but I'm not so much now. So although even money is good, I'm probably just going to stay clear of it. Yeah. I do like them. I still think they're going to be good. I think it's a big drop off from last year. Cool, right. Let's move to the next team, but we're not finished with the Lions yet. To make the playoffs, 9-5 on, so we're just short of 2-1 on, and to not make the playoffs, 6-4. We've all got them in the playoffs, I guess. We all got them winning the division then with that?
No, not me.
Yeah, I feel not. I think I did when I had them at 12-5, they did, but I feel not. I feel like there might be a wild card. They've won it 2 years in a row as well, haven't they? Is it 3 years in a row they've won the division?
2, I believe.
2 years in a row, isn't it? Having not won the division for that many years, are they suddenly going to reel off 3 in a row? When also there are that many other good teams in the division. I don't know. But I skipped had a slide, didn't I? So yeah, they're 7-5 to win the division, 9-2 to win the conference, 11-1 to win the Super Bowl. So they're in that kind of second tier of teams that are winning the Super Bowl. How far do you think they can go realistically this year?
I think they've got a chance. The one of them teams who could get to the Super Bowl. It's just, I think if they stay fit and hit at the right time, I think there is still a few free agents I think they could pick up, but similar to Barron, not surprising again at the defensive end. But there is 1 or 2. There's Clowney as well, with Zadarius Smith, just to get that covered, just to help that defense along. But yeah, there's certainly a team who's got a chance. I wouldn't be surprised if in the Super Bowl. No way. So
yeah. 5th favorite to win the Super Bowl at the minute.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly, I think I prefer their price to win the Super Bowl than their price to win the division. Because I think they get to the playoffs, they can beat anybody. They can lose to anybody as well, obviously, but they can beat anybody. Whereas the division, I think it's about right. I think price-wise, I just have the Vikings winning the division. So I'd rather take that.
I think they could get as far as probably maybe an NFC Championship game. I think if they had to play the Eagles in January, the best Eagles and the best Lions, I'd take the Eagles. And about that, but also that's not how teams arrive to the playoffs, as the Lions sadly found this year. Getting home, so anything can happen. But yeah, I just feel the Eagles are too strong in the NFC. And I'm not sure the Lions, even on the best day, would be able to beat them in a playoff situation. Again, don't hate me, please, Lions fans. On to our 32nd and final team of our previews. Do you think our 32nd set of headlines are going to be the worst ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy writing these, for the first few episodes when we do this. And then when it comes to the later ones, it's such a drag. And fair play, jokes, you do most of the work. It's so difficult. Let's start with the Packers anyway. First Packers one, I should say. Golden opportunity. Packers go for gold at wide receiver as they draft a wide receiver in the first round for the first time since 2002. Pop quiz. Who was it?
Donald Driver? I have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't have the answer to that. I think it was. You can find the answer, Byron, see if you were right.
It was Javon Walker.
Javon Walker, there you go.
Who I've never heard of.
Can Golden be the Batman in a room full of Robins? And what are the fantasy expectations of Matthew Golden? Do you want to start there, Byron?
Yeah, I mean, fantasy expectations are kind of mixed on Matthew Golden. Some people are in love with the opportunity. He's been shining in training camp. And I think, I can't remember how strong of a take you had, Joe, but I know me and Paul were pretty low on Matthew Golden as a first rounder. He was rumored to go to the Cowboys at pick 12, 11, whatever the Cowboys picked up. And I know I was like, anybody but Matthew Golden. I don't want him. I just don't think he meshes well. I'm happier with George Pickens, truthfully. But there's some people who are really, really high on Matthew Golden in Green Bay this year. He's going as wide receiver 42 presently, which I don't hate. Truthfully, I think that's kind of a nice range around Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, Stephon Diggs, Juwan Jennings. Just after that is Jaden Reed, who goes as wide receiver 44. So that's kind of your top two wideouts there. Dobbs goes a lot later. Dontavian Wicks basically undraftable, and Christian Watson, he's undraftable because he's injured at this point. So the opportunity is definitely there for Golden. I hate his profile. I hate his numbers in college. But on any given play, you can see that he can hit anything. It's just when players fail to do it in college consistently, I really struggle to say that, well, they're going to overdo that and be better at the NFL level. It doesn't tend to work out. I know you had the start of, was it first round receivers who never got 1,000 yards in college, never get over 500 yards in the NFL in a season. I can't remember the exact numbers, but
Joe, I'll give you the start. There's three first round picks that have three first round NFL wide receiver picks that didn't have a 1,000 yard receiving season in college. It's more who they are. One's Henry Ruggs and the other's Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, not great.
Not great.
Yeah, and I think one of the other ones who just fell outside your time zone was Philip Dorsett as well, who not someone you say was a hit as a first rounder. So, but like I say, he has been shining in training camp. Jordan Love seems to love him. All beat reporters seem to say he's open every time he gets the ball. So maybe it's not a bet I'm making in fantasy. I think it's just too volatile. Maybe in best ball where you don't actually have to set a lineup and put him in every week and hope that you're going to get the 6 good games he has a season, which isn't an insult. I mean, 6 good games you should take for a wide receiver 44. But I would worry about my ability to pick when those games are going to be. So as someone I'm probably not taking in redraft, but I can understand it more in best ball.
Yeah, it's definitely one of them where it's a wait and see. Yeah, I always try to look at Steve Smith's his rankings during the drafts because I feel like he gets it right quite a lot, obviously. And he had Matthew Gordon as his wide receiver 1, and he was very high on him. So that's why I was a bit bullish. But I do worry that's where the Packers gone. That if he is just another wide receiver 2, I feel like that holds them back quite often. Where there's games where they just need someone to take over to just we've seen it with plenty of the teams where the wide receiver 1, it's going to him, but he still gets to him. And there's plenty of them in the league, but the Packers never seem to have them. They have a lot of wide receiver 2s who drop the ball a lot. I think last year was like a crazy number how many times their wide receivers dropped the ball. And you just look at the depth chart right now. Jaden Reed questionable, Dobbs questionable, Wicks questionable, Watson out. That's another big thing as well. It feels like these wide receivers were fairly bullish on Jaden Reed coming into last year, but he felt like he was just an injury-ridden season and he just couldn't get up to speed. So he's got the opportunity. There's not many much else. They brought in McCall Harmon as well, but no one should trouble him. He should be the wide receiver 1 if he can reach his potential, but it's just a lot to put on a guy's shoulder on his rookie year on a team which probably has aspirations to at least make the playoffs and go further, just with how their history have been. So yeah, I think it's a wait and see, but we'll see.
Yeah, he did have kind of big games when it mattered most last season, I think, for Texas as well, which is a good sign. So his 2 best games last season, by far and away, were in the college football playoff series, and they beat Georgia. Other way around. I'm trying to do it the other way around. So in the SEC championship, when they played Georgia and lost them in overtime, it was 8 for 162, and they had 7 for 149 in the semi-final against in that crazy game against Arizona State. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's just not a good start, is it, when kind of this group of players you're in is, as you mentioned, Philip Dorsett, Kadarius Toney, Henry Ruggs. Yeah, not great. Speaking of which, let's move on to headline number 2. Banksing on protection. I knew these were bad. Packers follow the trend in the NFC North as they invest on the interior of the offensive line, with Aaron Banks getting a 4-year, $77 million contract. Obviously, Joe, you've had the pleasure of watching Banks. What do you think? Good move for the Packers?
I think he's a good player. I think he had a decent year last year. I know the 49ers tried to keep him, but it was that contract that gave him. I think he was one of the highest paid guards. That's what I was shocked at. I don't think he's one of the best guards. But it's free agency. There's a scarce of good offensive linemen, and as soon as they're on the market, teams are going to pay way and above what market value is. So I think it improves the interior line. Again, like I mentioned in the headline, it's following the trend with the NFC North. It felt like the Vikings, the Lions, and the Packers, they all got knocked out last year in the playoffs because the interior offensive linemen went to shit. So they tried to improve it. Why not? He was probably one of the best guards available. So it's not my money. So why not give it a go? And it might work out. Because I sometimes think with offensive linemen, obviously you need the talent, but sometimes it's all about the scheme. There's plenty of teams who have average linemen, but they play way and above their ability just because how good the scheme and the players around. Because when you actually look at that team, they actually have a good offensive line. When you especially like the tackles with Byron was talking about Zach Tom in our 5-year draft. Elkin Jenkins, I think there's rumors he might be moving maybe a center or guard, but I still think they've got like a good line to help Jordan Love with going forward. So why not? I'd rather them invest and go for it than just saying, oh, let's go for a cheaper option and we're here next year, then being knocked out because the Rams just destroyed the line.
Excellent. Let's move on to number 3. Jairi packs his bag. Cornerstone of Packers defensive backs leaves for Baltimore. Hopefully not leaving too many holes and make them Swiss cheese. We love a dairy joke. Jairi Alexander. Do you think do we think they are kind of a bit weak there in the secondary as a result?
I think they're weaker, yeah. I mean, they brought Nate Hobbs in, but I think in an ideal world, you'd have got Jairi Alexander to take a pay cut and not have to cut him and have Nate Hobbs as an additional piece rather than a replacement piece. I think unquestionably it hurts. Jairi Alexander obviously hasn't been playing full seasons for a good while at this point, it feels like. So you can understand why there was frustration and why ultimately they did move on from him. But I think a player who can play at the top level, not being there is going to hurt, yeah.
And losing a fit captain always hurts a team. So.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's have a look at the next headline. Headline number 4. Can Green Bay finally pack a punch on D? With the D-line consisting of 4 first-round picks, young and exciting linebackers, and maybe the best safety duo, can they finally reach expectations? They have invested an awful lot of draft capital in this and high-end draft capital. It never really felt like it's come together. Did we expect them to kind of take a step?
Do we have this conversation every single year?
Well, we have done since we started this podcast, yeah.
Yeah. I think the big one this summer, talking about, has been Lucas Van Ness. 2 years into his career now. He's got 7, I think, total sacks, 3 in a 4 season. And he's played full seasons each year. I think he's one that, if this defense has got to step up, I think he's going to be a player who needs to step up and get towards that double-digit sack totals, which isn't a crazy high number, let's be fair.
Well, it's not anymore.
So, yeah, I think he's a player that they've got to look at as being like, you've got to hit the ground running this season, or, you're going to be looking at moving on from him again. 13th overall pick a couple of years ago, so I don't have a huge level of confidence in this defense is about to explode, I will say. So, yeah, the ability's there, the talent's there. Just it never quite seems to come together and be a dominant defense. I don't see this year being any different, really.
Yeah, they're certainly a great team on paper, and I think that's the problem. Like we said, and they always used to blame it on Joe Barry. But obviously Jeff Hafley has been in the last 2 years. So, but I think The linebackers are intriguing. I think Edwin Cooper had a great first year. Quay Walker had a good year as well. And, I mentioned this, so McKinney and Evan Williams. It's always funny. Obviously, Barkley got all the hype from leaving the Giants, but McKinney had a great year as well. Another former Giants leaving. So, yeah, it's just like how good do they need to be? I always worry about Jordan Love. I think a lot more people are a lot higher on him than I am. I think he's got a mistake in him quite often. So you need that defense to help him out. And last year, especially at the beginning, they were doing some crazy interceptions and they were taking the ball away. I think McKinney had quite a few great players to start the year. But they just need to be consistent. And can they get, either top 12 defense just to help that offense out and keep them in games and when it really matters? Because, it feels like when the big games are there, they do crumble that defense. And, you need to help out your quarterback, who sadly also does as well.
Yeah, I think McKinney had the first 5 games of the season. He had an interception in, which is crazy way to start the year. It was like him and Tyrann Mathieu were just going see which one could last the longest to start the year. Excellent. Right, let's have a look at transactions for the Packers. And I suppose there's just one more issue I want to shout out. Just if you guys, I'm sure you guys probably would mention it as well. But we could have. I mean, it's a long shot given kind of the kicker that the Packers have. We could have an Irish kicker and punter duo. Well, the punter's already set, so it should be an Irish punter and kicker duo. Mark McNamee, lad from Dublin, he's in there as kind of like the second kicker behind Brandon McManus. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Dan Whelan punter holding kicks for, Mark McNamee. That'd be nice.
Yeah, and if obviously, like you said, they've already got the punter set, so if they can add a kicker to that room, the Irish contingent will be quite literally doubling.
Great gags here as always. A good team, great teams cover. So I'm flying out to Dublin next week or today, as this is released, for the Erling's College Football Classic. Very much looking forward to that, seeing people and having a great time watching Iowa State, Kansas State, 2 ranked teams as well in the top 25 in preseason rankings. But we're not here to talk about the Erling's College Football Classic. We'll carry on talking about the Green Bay Packers. Who on the Packers that we've not talked about again do you think is going to make a big difference?
Can it be a player that's not on here and isn't an addition?
Joe, have you got one that's on the screen first before we let Byron go rogue?
Not like anyone like shouting out, to be honest. There's obviously we mentioned Nate Hobb, and we'll see what how the injuries with the wide receivers would Savion Williams get his opportunity, but yeah.
All right, Byron, for our 30-second go at this, I'll allow it.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So, tight ends last year who had yards after contact per reception over 6. Dallas Goedert at 6.17, Isaiah Likely 6.17, Dalton Kincaid 6.36, George Kittle, gold standard 6.71, Tucker Kraft 9.38 yak per reception. Not bad, right?
Not bad. He's a great player. I love Tucker Kraft.
And then just as a second one, yards per target over expectation tight ends in the league last year. 2 players above 2. Everyone else is below 2. Tucker Kraft 3.9, George Kittle 4.2. This is George Kittle 2.0. Doesn't matter what Matthew Golden is. Doesn't matter what Jaden Reed is, although I love Jaden Reed as well as a fantasy player. Tucker Kraft is the truth. Tucker Kraft is somehow going as like tight end 11 in fantasy drafts. It's ridiculous. Keep your TJ Hawkinsons. Keep your Evan Ingrams. Keep your Dalton Kincaids. Just draft Tucker Kraft later. If you don't get McBride, you don't get Bowers, you don't get George Kittle, don't bother with these midders, Sam Laporta, etc. Just draft Tucker Kraft and thank him later because he's legit and he is the Packers' best pass catcher.
Excellent. Yeah, love Tucker Kraft. I think I've got a lot of him. So hopefully, yes, those words ring true to a great season for Tucker Kraft. I'm messing up the screen big time here. So we've got a win total for the Packers over under 9.5 wins. Where have you guys got the Green Bay Packers?
8 and 9. I have them at.
Joe,
snapped. I've got 8 and 9 too.
Oh, I've got them 10 and 7, but maybe pushing to 11 and 6. I think the Packers are going to be really, really good. You can get the over 9.5 at 20-21, so just short of evens, as is the under. So Vegas doesn't know. 20-23. 9 and 10 seems to be that. Yeah, why have you got them kind of a shade under then?
Outside of the Lions, who I think are a better team, I think the Vikings have improved a lot this offseason. I think the Bears have improved a lot this offseason. I think the Packers have largely stood still this offseason. So it's not really a ding on the Packers as much as it is. I think they're in a tough division. I don't think they've improved very much. And yeah, they went 11-6 last year. So 3 games back from that maybe is a little harsh, but I don't know. I just look at the schedule, I look at the team, and I struggled to get them to 10 wins, truthfully. Obviously, a couple of these could sway differently. They are that kind of team that can win games, but I think they've just got... We said it about the wide receiver room. Like, I kind of feel like it's kind of the way with the entire team. It's like, it's a lot of Robins and not many Batmans. I'm not sure what the plural of Batman is. And yeah, I totally agree with Joe's assessment on Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love could make any single throw in the league, probably up there with most any quarterback. But I think sometimes I watch him, I'm like, his footwork looks so poor. Like, he's throwing off his back foot, and sometimes he gets away with it. But I just think, for a player that was drafted in 2020, I know he hasn't started all 5 years, but he doesn't seem to have ironed out like those, what I would call weaknesses and opportunities for improvement in his game. So yeah, I can well see this being one that bites me a little, but I don't see the Packers as a Super Bowl team, so I don't think it's going to bite me that much.
Yeah, that's fair, I think. But yeah,
I was going to say, I feel like the Packers as well, if I said the Bears were the biggest boom or bust, I feel like the Packers could be like close by, especially a team who's like set and not changed. Like, I think the Vikings could be similar, but they've just got more or less a rookie quarterback, and it's his second year, but it's his first time starting. But with the Packers, I feel like I underestimate the Packers quite often just because of the team, and I'm not hugely in love with Love. But then I also think when it comes to seasons, they've got Matt LaFleur, who always just seems to win. So I can also see them getting 10, 11 wins because he's one of the best coaches, I think, to top his team up to get to that 10, 11 wins. So I think, again, I've got them at 8, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get 10 or 11 just with the head coach and the
Big agrees to that. I think Jones got a really good year. Matt LaFleur's a great coach. I think they've got enough enough easier games on the schedule as well to pad it a bit, and then I think they can win again. They can win games, pick up a couple of those wins again in the tougher games because they're not kind of going to go over in those games. Against your Lions, Ravens, Eagles, Vikings. Yeah, they are tough games. Bengals and stuff, but they're not going to go over in that. So I 10. I think it's a solid shout for the Packers. I almost was like, I really like a lot of the individual Jordan Love bets as well, but I stayed away from it from that, and we'll get to it at the end of the show. But there's one in particular, Jordan Love, most passing yards in the NFC North. I like that one. I think that was just a shade over 2-1. I think it was 2.5-1. I don't know, might be 11-2. I think it's Goff and then Love. So I like that one, but I think they're just going to be really, really solid because I think they're just a fundamentally very solid football team. Right.
I think what's interesting, the last 7 weeks, 5 of the games is against division rivals.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of bookend against the teams in their division. So that should make it interesting going into that.
We saw a lot of this last year with NFC, I think it was very stacked schedule because the Bears didn't play a division game until week 10, I don't think. So ended up being obviously very stacked towards the end, which is good. Good for us, especially when it was the best division in football. So future odds, will they make the playoffs? Yes, 10-13. So I've got them, to make it. No even money, you guys. Are you comfortable then with them not making the playoffs, or?
No, just because what I said about Matt LaFleur and they've been in the playoffs the last few years. So evens is not bad, but make the playoffs or not. But it's like I said, I've got a wide range of where they can go this year. I'm not as confident as I am with other teams.
Cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm hugely confident, but I'd be happy backing it.
Excellent. Future odds then for the winning the division. I've fallen apart on the last team of the previews here. Winners 13-5 to win the division. I really liked it. It's only just come a little bit. I love this at 3-1. I think the Packers can win that division. Yeah, when it was 3-1, now it's come down a little bit. Should have bet it then. Conference 10-1, 20-1 to win the Super Bowl. Any way you guys think they can push the Lions or Vikings, as you two seem to like, for the division?
I think for the division, yes. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, I've got the NFC North dropping down a bit compared to last year.
It's tough. You had 15 and 14 win team. Like,
yeah, in terms of wins, I've got them all around like 10ish. So I think they've got a chance. Just with Conference Super Bowl, I just don't think they're a team who show up in big games. I think it's been like that for a while. And Matt LaFleur's got them quite far in the playoffs quite often, but they find ways to lose, and it feels like I mentioned, I feel like Jordan Love's one of them kind of players as well, unfortunately. Until he proves me otherwise, and if he does, then I'll eat my words.
Excellent. Let's head in then to our best bets to finish off the episode. I'll go first then. Top two lines, I'm just going to set Lions and Packers as top two. I think the Vikings are going to take quite a big step back. Again, doesn't mean they're going to be a bad team, but I think the Vikings are going to take a big step back. Lions and Packers, top two for me, just short of 2-1, 19-10. Aiden Hutchinson, I think he's in for a huge season. So he, before his horrific injury last year against the Dallas Cowboys, had 7.5 sacks in 4 and a bit games because he obviously went out during that game. He was on pace for a huge year, possibly record-breaking. But yeah, I think he obviously stays fit the full season. 15 is, I think 15 is more than achievable. His line's 13.5, so you can get even money at 13.5. So I think for an extra sack and a half, take the value, 8-5. I think Aiden Hutchinson's going to have a monster season.
Like it.
Thank you. Yeah, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like the Aiden Hutchinson line.
Joe?
Yeah. Oh, I've been updated one of mine. Sorry. So my
Cowboys lose the wild card round.
Yeah.
There you go. That, yeah.
You can see we're doing it last minute, this kind of thing. So I just got my player one is Roma Dunze to get 1,000 plus receiving yards at 2-1. I think we've talked about. I think he's going to be the main guy for the Bears, and yeah, I do like them odds. If you just go to Byron, then I'll quickly look for my team's one.
We just left it as blank on the sheet as well. You put the one bet in and then didn't.
I've been a busy guy.
I appreciate it, Byron.
So I've got the Eagles winning the division, obviously. Now I have the Vikings winning the division at 7-2. I think they've just strengthened, and I think the Lions have taken a little step back, and they were close enough last year to it, so why not? And that's at 7-2, which I think is a great price for a team who won how many games last year? 14 games?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I just think that's. I think they've got better than last season, and yet they're 7-2 to win the division. Doesn't really make much sense to me, truthfully. And secondly, I have Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy to go over 4,000 passing yards at 9-1. Betting against history with the Bears, obviously. But as bad as he was last year, Caleb Williams only needs to throw like 25, 27 more yards per game and play every game to get 4,000 yards. It's not that crazy of a number to hit. It sometimes seems like it because Chicago have literally never done it. So I understand why it seems higher than it should do, maybe, but it seems like I don't say a foregone conclusion. That's maybe too strong, but 9-1. Last year, Sam Darnold got 4,300 yards for Kevin O'Connell. I think they'd like to run the ball plenty. I'm sure they will run the ball plenty, but I still think 4,000 yards is well achievable. JJ McCarthy, some negatives to his training camp, but largely positive. You still have Justin Jefferson, you still have TJ Hawkinson, you're going to miss Jordan Addison for the first 3 weeks, but I think you can live with that. And yeah, Caleb Williams with them weapons around him. If he's not getting 4,000 yards this year, I don't say will it ever happen for Chicago, but will it ever happen for Chicago? Hopefully that's bought Joe enough time to think of a bet for this season that doesn't involve the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think barring injury, Caleb Williams hits the 4,000 yards, I think.
Yeah, it's really tough to see how he doesn't. If he's only 30, I mean, it's less than 30. He's only 30 yards per game short last year, and he played really bad football last year. Like, there's no way to dress it up otherwise. Then surely he gets to 4,000 this year if he plays all 17. I don't really know how he doesn't.
I agree. Joe?
So I can't find the odds, so I'll just say it, and then whatever the odds are, we'll go for it. I've got because I can't find this anywhere, because it's definitely, we've talked about this in the previous years, but it's I've got the Vikings to get the most sacks this year. Yeah. So whatever the odds are. But I've been looking for the odds, I can't find them anywhere, so unless they release it just before the season. Who knows?
No, I think they're usually out. They were usually out for when our playoffs were. I'll find it for you. Give me a second. No, I'm not gonna find it. We'll post it.
Yeah.
Cool. What a shambolic way to end our 8 episode division preview series. Joe just fallen to pieces at the last minute. Jigsaw over here. Right. Thank you very much for everyone that's watched and listened to our division preview series. We have been good teams and great teams cover for this part. And now we've got to this momentous end. The season's about to start, so make sure you are following along. The last few bits we're going to have power rankings. We're going to have our full season bets with all our futures, some of them which I've already talked about, but plenty of others as well. Then we head into week 1. We've got fantastic guests every single week when we preview the slate for the NFL weekly each Sunday. And then we've got fantastic reviews as well. We're going to be in Ireland next week. We're going to be down for the London games. We're going to be getting here, there, and everywhere. We're going to get out to some of the fans' watch parties. I'm already off to a Jets one in early September that's here in Leeds. So we'll try and get to some others in Manchester and stuff and meet some wonderful people. But yeah, follow Good Teams Win Great Teams cover over on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Overcast for the audio version of the pod, and YouTube for the video version, and X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, at GTW_GTC for all our socials and all our posts. And we will catch you next week.